We're going to make it go. We're going to do it now.
All right.
Greetings, the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on the John Campea YouTube channel. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies.
There's a company called Hot Toys, and they make these insanely realistic, renderings of characters. They do them for all the Marvel characters or whatever, and they look so much like you. It's disturbing, actually. Scary. They look so much like you, but they're tiny. They're 18 inches or something like that. They actually that's what's crazy about that company is they hand make the. They carve the mold. The mold of
That's crazy.
It's wild.
Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, and, whatever else people want to hang on me. That's right, I'm Robert Meyer Burnett, and I'm Robcasting from the Robservatory. You imagination connoisseurs, you members of the Post-Geek Singularity community, how are you? We're no longer on Order 66. We're on Order 67. And no one even knows what that is because everybody was dead, so they couldn't tell you because Order 66 had been implemented. But it's the 67th. And if it wasn't, Josh would tell me, Rob, it's not the 67th episode. It's the 68th episode. But he's not here either. Either way, you know who is here? You know her, you love her. She's Mmmm.
Hello, Robert. How are you tonight?
Well, I'm good. No, I'm good. It's now it's Saturday. I'm sad because Dieter Bastian can't do Let's Get Physical Media tomorrow, and I haven't really talked to anybody about replacing him. Maybe I'll just do a Robservations and not do a Let's Get Physical Media. What can I say? I don't know. Elizabeth and I did watch one of my discs last night, and it was quite the movie. God is a Bullet. Directed by Nick Cassavetes, who directed John Q and Alpha Dog, and I got to tell you, it was a very unpleasant film, but it was interesting, and I kind of liked it, and kind of didn't like it. It was about a Satan worshiping cult it was the most misogynistic movie. The violence against women was so extreme, and then it was also an art house film. It was all kinds of crazy stuff, all wrapped into one, and Elizabeth couldn't believe she was watching it. But we watched it all the way to the end. It's 2.5 hours. It kind of was good for my state of mind, I think.
Sometimes you need to see things that give you different feelings and emotions. And I think that's honestly very therapeutic.
Yeah, and it starred the girl, and I forget her name. It's Michaela something, but she starred in It Follows. I think she's a really good actress. And this performance, she was asked to do a lot. I don't think I've ever seen... If someone, I can only imagine the casting session when she met with Nick Cassavetes. He would ask her, "You get hit in the face a lot with fists, men's fists. Are you okay with that?" Because man, this was a brutal movie. Have you seen it? Have you seen God as a Bullet?
No, I haven't seen it, but I guess I better put it on my list.
It stars Jamie Lannister.
Mm-hmm.
Nicola Coster Waldau, however you pronounce his name. And it was beautifully made, but it was, it was tough to watch, hard to watch.
Is it kind of like on the order of Tatane when it comes to like the injuries?
No, it was just no, because it was really brutal. It was women being brutalized by men and shot in the face, and it was really, 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 even for me, it was hard to watch. And it was really mean spirited. Like it was not fantastic, and yet some of the movie was shot in Mexico, some of the movie was shot in New Mexico, and it had this nightmarish quality. And it's got like this heavy metal Satan worshiping group in it. They're all tatted up. Jamie Foxx is in this movie.
Wow.
And he plays a one-armed. He's missing an arm, and he's got, what is that? When black pigment that Michael Jackson had, vitiligo. So they had Jamie Foxx had vitiligo. His character did on his face. So the makeup was pretty good. And he had, he's fully tatted up, and I'm like, how did he? And he's like one of the executive producers in the movie, and I'm like, how the hell did he wind up in this movie? But I don't think he's capable of turning in a bad performance. But it was, and he plays like he's a tattoo artist, and he has one arm, and it was. I mean, this movie was crazy. I don't know if it's for everybody. Elizabeth's like an hour and a half in. She's like, how long is this movie? And I go, we have an hour to go, and she's like, no way. When's it going to end? And I don't know.
What was the inspiration for the film?
Apparently, well, it's based on a book of the same name. It's sort of based on a true story. And what I did appreciate about it was it seemed like everywhere these people went, they just met heavy metal, Satan worshiping people that were either Spanish or English. And it seemed like they never went into really a big city, although some of the people lived in like nice neighborhoods. But it seemed like they were in hell the whole time. And I know that there was a lot of art house pretensions to this movie. And I went back, and the reviews were not kind. People were pretty angry. But it was really well made, and I quite enjoyed watching it. I just don't know. I mean, it was really distasteful. I mean, there was a scene because these girls, this Satan worshiping, drug dealing gang would abduct beautiful girls from their mother's side when they're like 10 and 11. And when you find out you don't actually see what they do to these girls, but they have this one flashback scene where the main character explains what they do to these girls. It was so beyond the pale. Like it was like, imagine the worst things you could possibly do. And that's exactly what's happening here. And you're like, why? But I know it was, and there's this great speech when she explains that there's no reality except the bullet that that's why it's called God is a bullet. This is the only real thing in the world because it's, and I'm just watching this going, okay. But I bought it and I own the physical media, and it had a really great making of on it.
I think I saw a made-for-television movie like this, and it was about a woman who was abducted, and they periodically abduct young women. And I'm not trying to give bikers a bad name, but it was like a biker gang that would periodically abduct these women and pretty much keep them captive for a long time. But her family was very vigilant, and they went and got her, and she was really just messed up from everything they put her through. But that kind of reminds me of it.
Yeah, no, it's based on like there's a lot of true inspiration from true stories. It's just, and you realize that these people are truly, I mean, they are an embodiment of evil. They lack empathy, and they embrace the very worst in mankind, and those people are out there. And apparently, according to this movie, they all live in the American Southwest.
Well, it also reminds me of another film called Identifying Features, made a few years ago, and it was about a woman, a Mexican woman, who was waiting for her son to show up. He never showed up. She goes to missing persons in Mexico, and they said, well, yeah, we think we have him here. She goes in the room to identify his body, and it's not him. And she says, you don't understand. This is not my son. They're like, oh, yes, it is. And she's like, no, it's not. But the police, they were not going to pursue looking for him. So she decides to follow his route where he went through. And it turned out that he was abducted by a group of very cruel people. And the only way that the son could survive in this environment was to become one of them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. Well, you read about just today. I read like the Mexican drug cartels. What they do. It reminded me of what you hear about the behavior, what the cartels do to people. Like just today, I read. I mean, it's a little depressing to start the show out on, but they like abducted 5 teenagers and brutalized them all and killed them all. You know, and people that lack empathy, people that I get it. We have a lot of that in the world. But do you want to watch a movie about that for 2.5 hours?
Well, I think it's kind of like also that artist that you like. A few years ago, we were talking about. I think he wasn't Mexican. I think he was a Brazilian director. Was it called New Order or?
Oh yeah, that's a Mexican director. Yeah, New Order.
And he tends to have films that do have a certain violent element, but the element always seems to be justified by some sort of political premise.
Yeah.
And I really do kind of enjoy what we see, only because I kind of see some of the behavior of it represented in what we see in our modern world. And of course, I think that's perhaps his main point. But these people have to kind of still survive and thrive in these environments. And it seems impossible, but somehow some of them are surviving. It's really a very interesting art form to go into, knowing the complexity of it all.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, like, as we all are imagination connoisseurs, there is a bent to our lives that I think is inherently optimistic and positive, because we're influenced by things that we like, stories and all the, I mean, flights of fancy that stimulate our imaginations is where I think it really all starts. And then all the stuff, whether you collect physical media or read comic books or collect action figures, that's all peripheral to the stories. But it really comes down to stories that have some kind of uplifting, not even necessarily a message, but the positive aspects of being alive in the cosmos now, and looking at all the amazing stuff that happens. And I also know that that's a function of what time we live in. Like, this wouldn't be the case if we lived in the Dark Ages, when life was a horrible slog, or we didn't grow up in Africa and were dragged over here 400 years ago during the transatlantic slave trade, where you had to be a slave your whole life, and that's all you would ever know. And so we didn't have to be Christians thrown into the Colosseum to be savaged by tigers and stuff for the pleasure of the mob in ancient Rome. And I think that where we live now, we're lucky that we're afforded, and of course in America you see the worst kinds of degradation as well. But it's pretty great to be alive during this time, when we can also celebrate the amazing quality of what it means to be alive in the world and be a human being, and all of those things. I mean, there's so much wonder in the universe that if you're allowed to experience it, some people's, they're just not born into a world that would allow them to. But we have a Joey here. Joey Johnson says, I said this to RM on Sunday brunch, but I'm cancer free.
So happy for you, Joey.
I didn't mention anything until Sunday. I'd like to thank you too, and the rest of the community, for keeping me positive and occupied the last year. I mean, yeah, and see, nobody knows how sweet life is than Joey here, because he realizes that, a lot of the time we take life for granted. And then if there's the possibility it could be cut short, you cherish it even more, because you think about what you don't have time to do, or and now Joey's been through that. So from now on, Joey will, congratulations, Joey. But I think Joey now will, when people say, oh, you have to treat every day like it's your last, or enjoy yourself, Joey, it's easy to say that, but to intellectually understand it the way Joey has, he'll never take anything for granted. And congratulations on being cancer free. That's amazing. Chemist is like, another stream to keep us keno and comfy. Thank you, sir. Also, hi. Really enjoying the gaming lately, ma'am.
I haven't been gaming as much, but it's going to start next week. I'm having my gaming come back. So it will come back. I assure you guys. And I can't wait to start doing my gaming streams. And I look forward to hearing from all of you who are also gamers what you've been doing and what games you've been enjoying this September going into October.
Yeah, and well, which is good. I want to play Starfield. I haven't played that. I really want to play it.
It looks so good.
Stephen Bro became a member. I think it's Bro, Breaux, Bro. It's the French spelling. And Scott Bartholomew says this week's very short takes, which was I think the shortest yet, offering holograms all the way down, was another abomination. I didn't even watch it. The first three. I mean, Star Trek has meant so much to me in my life, and it's always been something that I've looked at as being, it's always elevated, I think, the discussion. And to see where they've taken between, I mean, I know some people like Lower Decks, and if you're predisposed to liking, that kind of comedy and everything, that's fine. But to me, that's not what Star Trek ever was. I mean, Star Trek was thought-provoking, and if you turning Star Trek into a comedy, to me, it's not what I'm interested in. And as a genre, like no one's making a Lower Decks version of Star Wars. I mean, they kind of did that on Robot Chicken a lot, but I can't even watch it anymore. I mean, it's weird because I see Star Trek as not being an elevated, erudite thing. But in the meantime, let me ask you this: what did you think of Ahsoka this week?
Yeah. Well, my opinion about the show hasn't changed very much from last week. We have an episode where finally, it's in the description. It says that there's this big reunion with Ahsoka. Of course, we do see that she does finally arrive at her destination. And then we also are confronted with the fact that Hera has to defend herself. And there's this really special moment where C-3PO appears in front of, I guess, these senators, only to find that when Princess Leia's name is brought up, we don't actually see anybody playing her role. And this would have been such a great moment for Billy Lord to walk in and play Princess Leia. And I just felt like this was such a special moment. This could have changed so much. This could have been that moment in Ahsoka that everybody would have said, oh my gosh, it's Billy Lord and she's playing Princess Leia. This would have been a very special moment. And I think no one would have really cared. As far as I'm concerned, it's Carrie Fisher's, daughter. And it would have been, just such a special moment, especially for me. I think I would have been crying if I had seen Billy Lord show up as Senator or, Leia Organa. I think I just would have just started crying. But we didn't get that. And I really was thinking that's what they were going to do. Then, we kind of do have this confrontation. There's some fighting. Ahsoka doesn't have time. And then, she kind of says something about, well, I don't have to, kill anybody. That there doesn't have to be any killing. And I almost thought to myself in the show, is everybody going to survive this? Like this, it was almost like I couldn't tell whether THRAWN was necessarily a bad guy at this point. I mean, I know he was doing something, but I still can't quite tell what his motivation is and what he's going to do. So that was a little confusing. I thought he was going to do something so terrifying. He says, kill the Purgles if you see Ahsoka approach. Kill them. And nothing happened. They just got the hell out of there. They just zipped out of Dodge. They couldn't get out of there fast enough. So I'm wondering, it is very funny. Ahsoka did greet Ezra in such an endearing manner, maybe more endearing than Sabine did. And, Hati was abandoned by Baylen, which surprised me. But I'm wondering, I'm actually more excited to know what Baylen is up to. What is he going to do? He's up to some kind of plan that I have no idea what it is, but I'm just team Baylen all the way here. Not exactly what I thought where we would be in episode 7, which is the second to the last episode. And I think that, this was Dave Filoni's vision. I get it. It's great. But I'm not necessarily that, I'm not understanding what the motivations for the bad guys. It doesn't feel like they're gaining anything. Are they getting anything, Robert?
I don't know. I mean, to me, and I think that's I keep thinking to myself when I'm watching this, I'm like, okay, like I watched the Clone Wars and I watched Rebels, and I like the Clone Wars. You know, I especially like those last 4 episodes. I thought were really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Going into Rebels, which is all fine, but I think what's really interesting about this show, like the opening scene with C-3PO. I mean, I understand why, because Mary Elizabeth Winstead and all that, and she's there, and they have to keep her in the story. But you bring C-3PO in, and I ask myself, okay, what is this story that I'm watching? What is it about? And we've now had Ahsoka being trained in whether it's the world between worlds or someplace else, and being trained with Anakin, which kind of is a retread with things we've kind of already seen, but kind of not. And then, like you said, I do not know. If somebody would ask me right now, describe what this story's about, I don't think I could do it. Because I don't have a handle on where, like, and there's only one more episode. And even if it ends on a cliffhanger, the villains aren't in any position to really do anything. Like, what's the threat? And I would assume that at this point, Luke Skywalker is rebuilding the Jedi Order somewhere. But it's not like, well, they don't have to deal with the Jedi. Like, what do they want to do? What does THRAWN want to do? I don't know. Other than get home? Because they've been stuck there for 12 years? I don't know.
I don't either. I'm waiting for this evilness to be there. And Baylen is so intriguing. He's so captivating. He's so, relevant in this. He's just stands out so much that you almost can't take your eyes off of him when they do put the camera on him. And it really does draw your attention in a way that the other characters are not drawing your attention. Like, you're not drawn to a lot of these other characters, except for C-3PO, which I was like, oh my God, it's C-3PO.
Right.
Yes. But Baylen is taking away a lot of the, I would say passion for the show. This is a new character. He's, of course, Ray Stevenson is giving a spectacular performance. And every week I can't wait to see what he's going to do next. I was not expecting him to ditch Shin Hati. I'm sure she wasn't expecting it. Were you expecting that, Robert?
No. But again, I mean, it makes me not really sure, like, again, what is it? Like, here they're in another galaxy. And I keep thinking to myself, and they've been there for like a decade or something. And I'm like, what have you been doing? Like, what do you do, Grand Admiral THRAWN, for the last decade of your life? How have you spent your day? Like, what do you do? Do you get up in the morning and brush your teeth? Do you go down and train your troops? Like, what is it you've been doing? And I know that I don't mean to be flippant, but if you are an Imperial officer, you're part of the Imperial remnant, whatever the hell you're doing, and you're now, the Purgles took you across the galaxy because of EZRA or whatever, and you're stuck on this. Well, you still have hyperdrive, so your Star Destroyer presumably can go inside the galaxy. Why wouldn't you go explore the galaxy? You've got an entire new galaxy you've never been in. Where, I mean, if the Yuzan Vong are there or whatever, who knows? Whatever you're going to... I would think that... Wouldn't you have figured out a way to entertain yourself? And no, but maybe now I'm very curious because I thought the episode was very interesting, and I was like constantly looking at it going, all right, okay. And I was fast, like you said, Baylen. I'm like, what's he got going on here? What's happening? And so I definitely was very interested in what was happening and why it was happening and where is it going to go and what's going to happen next. And we have our other lovely co-host here, but I'm having a hard time with him because there's nothing behind him. It's just an empty space. I don't know what it means. So please welcome You know him, you love him. He's the 1/6 scale man. He's Lael Rockwell.
Hey,
How are you,
Leo.
Hey,
sir?
what's up, man? How you doing, bro?
What happened? Did your figures
Well, no,
abandon you?
no. I got a brand new computer, and I was in the middle of setting it up today, but I had to go to a
Oh,
wedding. So we went to a family member's wedding and got back a little late. So I was like, rather than just set it up, I'll just work off the laptop
oh,
because it makes more sense. So I'm upstairs in the kitchen on the laptop.
no, all right.
It's a
So
bit more convenient,
I thought you
right?
were going to do it. Tell me you're doing a deep dive into those detops, man. And you're going to renovate the
No,
whole thing.
no. That's it's still downstairs. Everything is still secure. It's just that right now I have to wait because, like I said, tomorrow I'm gonna get up and when you set up a brand new iMac, bro, it's like you got to go through hoops and
Oh
hurdles.
yeah, it's a day long process.
Yeah,
You
it's
got to
like
get
a
everything where
whole
you want it to be.
yeah, bro, yeah, and yeah, because the old Mac, it just called it quits. I had it since like 2014.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
and it just called quits. So I was like, you know what? Let me just stop cutting corners. And I have this is like my third Mac because the other one I have strictly for music. I mean, that one I had to get a new one for everything else that I do besides that. So I was like, might as well just kind of break the bank and do it and just get an updated version. So why not?
Well, since you're here, Darth Plato
Yeah.
wants to know: is Shin the new Mara Jade? Is Mano or Karga the new Talon Card?
I'm not ready to say that yet. And here's the thing why, because again, there is still room to really bring in an official Mara Jade because one that has never really been introduced. So there's still space to do it. But again, they could possibly, if he's wanting to create his own version of Heir to the Empire, then see, the thing is, I guess right now I'm not ready to say that Shin. It's sort of like a wait and see type of situation for me because I'm not ready to basically say that she's completely going to take that turn, that she's going to be Ahsoka's, new Padawan. There is conflict in her, but I think that conflict is going to be explored over time. It's not something that's going to happen within one episode. If there's a season 2, there's a possibility that they might explore it there. But I think that again, her level of conflict, there's more to it than that. There's more to it than what we kind of know right now. I mean, again, does she feel betrayed by Baylen? Possibly. Is she going to side with THRAWN? I think there's a bit of hesitation there because there's clearly some distinction between or some discomfort between her and Morgan Esp. You know what I mean? So there's something there. She's not really on board with the whole, idea of the Night Sisters. You know what I mean? There's some hesitation there. But I think that Shin has more of a belief and a need to understand the Force for what it is. Yes, she may actually have, but it like a lot of people is like, you know what? She's a power hungry individual. She's her thirst for power. She has a bloodthirst for power. I think there's more to it than that. I think that basically she's acting out like any teenager or any young individual would, whereas she's trying to really discover who she is. She felt that she needed that leadership from Baylen. She has a belief in him and also a level of disappointment, not just in him, but in herself, because she may basically feel as though she's disappointed in him, the reason why he's turning his back. But I think there's more to it. He might sense a bit of fear. He might have a bit of fear in her, feeling as though she might, because remember, one of his biggest things is the thirst for power, but how people use and wield that power. Where that power, it blinds you, it infects you. It sometimes can make you a bit really, really delusional. He saw that in Anakin. Does he want to see a repeat with someone he's teaching? With Shin? No. He's again, when he told her, I wasn't training you to be a Jedi. I was training you to be something more. You know what I mean? So again, he wanted her without really outwardly saying it and trying to push her into that direction, because I think with Baylen, he believes in choice. He believes in giving her a choice. You have a choice. I can teach you certain things, but you have a choice of where you want to go. If you choose the side of, power, that thirst for power, aligning yourself with someone who's a warmonger, then I can't change you from that directive. I just know where I'm going. My path is totally different. If you choose to follow me, then I can open you up to so many different ideas at the same time. We're on this path together. But he didn't want it. He's doing with the Jedi really couldn't, which present a choice. You have a choice. This is what you can do if you want to. If you don't want to, I'm not going to try to change your mind. So I don't think it was a level of betrayal. He just sensed that her idea of the Force was totally different, and where she was going could potentially lead towards danger. And that's why he said what he said at the end. You know what I mean? So I not really to call her Mara Jade. I'm not really to say that she's really going to make a drastic change, but I'm not also ready to say that she's purely evil. I think she's just really conflicted. And it's just going to take some time to see how that plays out.
We have one more episode of this show, at least this season. Let me ask you both, what do you think is going to happen in this final episode? What are your predictions?
Well, I want them to leave that area of the galaxy. That's the only thing that I think I would like to see. And I'd like to see everybody go. I don't know how it will happen. I don't know the mode. I have no idea. But it would be nice if everybody was able to go, get out of this area of the galaxy, and they could continue this entire operation wherever it goes. I guess in a movie or in a second season, because I don't really think much more is going to happen, but I could see the journey back to our galaxy happening in the next episode.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think that there's all these questions like Baylen. What does Baylen want? Obviously, they put this plan in motion to get this hyperdrive engine across the galaxy to get everybody home. At least that was my belief. But like, and here's another thing, contacting people, what I just don't know what the plan is. Like what? So say they get everybody home. Well, then what? What's Grand Admiral THRAWN gonna do?
Well, I think I would like Baylen to kind of like kidnap all those coffin, inhabitants and keep them for himself. And see if he can go ahead and muster, which is, I think, what he wants. And I don't really know. I have no idea if it's true. But I think that Baylen might just want to muster some of that witchy power, that he kind of keeps making fun of it. But I think he secretly is mystified by it. And perhaps he is actually feeling something. He's not sharing it with us, but perhaps he did share it. Can't you feel it? Can you sense it? It may not be the case, but wouldn't you feel the Night Sisters around you? Because they're so intense, they're so strong, and they seem so connected. They're able to communicate across the galaxy. So as a Force user, I imagine you would be able to sense a Night Sister. I don't know, but I would like to think you could. So maybe he wants some of that power, and a way to get it might be in those coffins for him.
All right. I honestly have no idea what's going on, and where anyone, like, I'd be like, hey, it's a new galaxy, let's go explore it, and maybe they have been. Like, I don't know, maybe it just seems like I'm watching this. This is the first time I've watched Star Wars and been perplexed. Like, I just don't know where the characters, I think the thing that has thrown me off is they're in this other galaxy. They're not part of our galaxy anymore. And if they never got back to our galaxy, our galaxy, meaning it's not our galaxy, it's a galaxy far, far away, but our home galaxy, the home Star Wars galaxy. If they never get back to that home Star Wars galaxy, well, what would they do? Would they still continue on with these machinations? And if so, and I think that's the thing. It's like they've been there for 10 years at least. Ezra, what, 12 years, 10 years, 12 years. So they had to have been doing something for all this time. And what are the ramifications of whatever it is that they're doing? And what does it all mean? Like, what are those three sisters doing? Like, what are they? Where do they? Like I was saying, Lael, before you got here, I'm like, where do they spend their days? Like, they get up in the morning. Do they make coffee? Do they talk about what they're going to do? Like I just, when you set up these situations like this, I ask those questions because you're in a new galaxy. I'm like, I would have started building. Let's go find minerals and start building more Star Destroyers. Let's bring a little empire to this new galaxy of ours and see what's out there. Because is the Force strong in this other galaxy too? Are there Force users? It's a whole galaxy. Are there different life forms? And if there are, what are they up to? Because I would assume that a whole galaxy, you've got billions of stars and a whole group of other people, and it would be really interesting what their version or vision of the Force is, if they even have one. Does the Force apply in this new galaxy? But they haven't. I mean, I don't think they'll ever address any of that. But those are the questions I have when I watch the show. Because I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what they're doing. And that's the thing.
Well, I think for me, bro, like I don't err on the side of predictions and stuff like that. Like, I'm not trying to make any predictions on what's going to happen. I'm just following the narrative as it's being laid out. However we see it, whatever this last episode does, because like I said, again, I'm not, adding too many expectations to it. We've seen so many times that people really get upset at what they don't get. People want to see certain things. This is what I would like to see. Well, I want this to happen. I want that to happen. It's not really what you want because it's the writer's interpretation. It's the director's interpretation. So you have to basically just follow the breadcrumbs the way they're laid with them. Whatever they choose or however they choose to predict or depict this side of the galaxy, I leave it up to them. I'm just following the story as it's being laid out. And if I'm pleasantly surprised, then I'm surprised. But I'm not going into it with any type of expectations. I think that it's interesting. I think that definitely with Baylen, his story is so interesting because, again, he feels something. And we're following his narrative because we're feeling the Force as he feels it. He's, and again, rest in peace, Ray Stevens. He is doing such a great job with that.
Oh, he's such a breakout character. I mean, and that's And a lot of people want to basically see more of him. But at the same time, I mean, if you think about it, what if, and let's just be honest, what if they decide, or Ahsoka decides to strand them all, to leave all of them stranded? If it's a way to basically keep THRAWN from leaving, what if I basically destroy that hyperdrive and no one gets back? What if basically they feel as though that's the only way? What if all of them make a decision? What if, Sabine, Ezra, all of them make a decision to keep people in order to save the galaxy or that side of the galaxy? What if they destroy that hyperdrive? What if in that moment THRAWN tells them, you do not understand what you've done? You know what I mean? What if that happens? What if there's something in this side of the galaxy that poses such a larger threat and they have to be the ones to stop it, band together? Well, that's very interesting.
So,
if there's some bigger threat, and it's all of them.
I believe it could be, but I'm just waiting for Filoni. I'm waiting for his vision to flesh itself out. And, I just want to be, however it may be, if I don't set myself up for any type of expectations, I can be either pleasantly surprised. It can come off as a disappointment. I wouldn't know because I didn't have any expectations. So that's just the way I see it.
I from a storytelling standpoint, I read a lot of horror fiction, dark fantasy horror. I've always loved horror as a genre. And I've loved all different kinds of horror stories, and whether you're talking about human monsters or supernatural monsters or beings, but I've always loved the idea. I've always loved Satan as an antagonist, old scratch, But but the one thing about horror stories, like whenever you read a horror novel, the first 3/4 of it are the horror, the buildup, and then you find out whatever the revelation is, whatever's going on, and then the human characters or whatever your protagonists are spend the last quarter of the novel either defeating the evil or putting the genie back in the bottle or whatever it is that they're doing. Or if you have like a nihilistic version, the character, like at the end of, say, Halloween 3, he calls different networks, gets them off the air, and then the last network, he doesn't get off the air, and the signal's going to get broadcast, and half the kids in America are going to have their heads explode with snakes and roaches coming out of them, and down or Hurley's Warlock wins. But I've always wondered that the thing that I've always contemplated is, well, what happens after that? Like what happens when if evil is triumphant for this day and evil wins? Well, then what? Like, I've always been fascinated by what's evil going to do on day 2 and day 3? Like if evil is if the Sith win and there's no more battle, it's all done. What are they going to do then? And if the Sith were in a position of victory, and I don't think that the Sith necessarily, it's not like the Sith are suddenly going to start, I don't think so. Well, maybe they are, but they're not going to go back and resurrect anybody who ever died and bring back the shambling remnants of every person who ever lived. But we never find this out because then the story would not be interesting. The thing that I'm asking for is not something I actually really want to know because it's not exciting. It's like if the villain wins, I've always joked that if Satan came, if Al Pacino was able to get Keanu Reeves to sleep with Connie Nielsen in The Devil's Advocate, and at the end of The Devil's Advocate, it was able to conceive the Antichrist or whatever, well, then what? Like, the Antichrist still has to grow up, like go to school, do whatever he's going to do or she's going to do. And they never, as much as I love horror, I never get a sense of where it's going to go if evil wins. And I've always wanted to know. Like, I've always wanted to know, well, what would the devil do once the devil wins? Like, if the Antichrist, you watch the Omen movies and Damien's going to get defeated in Final Conflict. But I always like, well, what if he didn't? Like, what would he do the next day?
We sort of know what the devil did. If you compare that to Infinity War, Thanos won. He literally won.
Well, see, that was the thing. One of the things I loved about Endgame is you see him. He's just kicking it in this beautiful garden planet. He's literally picking fruit. He's making his thing. He's just sitting back. What I'm saying.
He
hung up his armor.
He won. And the heroes knew that in order for them to, and even again, Doctor Strange, which honestly, I thought it was a dick ass move for him not, to know that Tony was going to die. Like, he knew it. And he was like, if I tell you how this ends, it won't happen. And Tony just accepted it. You know what I mean? So I felt as though it was a dick ass move because Doctor Strange clearly didn't like Tony Stark. But listen, I mean, again, we knew that there was going to be a sacrifice at that point. The heroes, it wasn't going to be an easy win.
Right.
There wasn't. And it actually wasn't. It was them still licking their wounds after even finding a way to defeat Thanos. It was still, it came at a cost. It still fractured the galaxy. So there was still a level of success because even though you brought people back, there was still separation. There was still questions about, well, you caused this. The Avengers caused this in the very beginning. Are they still safe? Is it safe? This is what people felt. We're still, and actually, this movie caused a lot of problems in reality in our lifetime now because now we have a fractured, divided MCU that right now people love to hate it, love to hate the franchise.
That's hilarious.
Has a lot of confidence. So Thanos won on both fronts. He won in our reality, and he won in his reality.
It's funny.
Galaxy, bro.
I didn't even think about that because one of my favorite things in any movie ever was because I didn't expect it. Like I went into Endgame completely spoiler free. I didn't read anything. I made a conscious, because I loved Infinity War so much. I was like, and the end, like truly the end of Infinity War shocked me. I was like, when people are vanishing, and that effect. If you were to ask me what do I think, like you can always ask people. I had a conversation once with Joe Viscoso, who was one of the great pyrotechnics special effects artists in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. And I met him at Comic-Con, and I was behind a counter, and he came up. I think it was at the Geek magazine booth or something, and he's passed away, but him and his wife were there, and I was like, oh my God, I saw his name tag. I'm like, are you the Joe Viscoso? And I said to him, I go, I have a favorite explosion that you made. I have I mean, how many people can say that? But I told him, and he looks at me, and his wife, it was so funny. His wife crossed her hands like this, and like looked over, and he goes, what's your favorite explosion? And I go, the fourth TIE fighter, the final TIE fighter in Star Wars, that explosion, and then this explosion that comes out in the middle. And his wife goes like this and just shakes her head, and she goes, he's been trying to recreate that since 1976. and because they, the movie came out in 77. And it was so funny because she knew exactly what I was going to say, because apparently that's everybody's favorite explosion, because that center explosion with the big explosion and the center that comes out, that was probably unplanned. It was better. And they're all sitting behind the camera. It's one of those great times when you're like, oh my God. So I told him, and I had a favorite explosion. So everybody's got these favorite weird things in movies. Mm-hmm. In Endgame, when Thor kills Thanos, he went for the headshot, and he walks out of Thanos' little hutch, wherever he's living. He's blurry. Like the camera, he walks out of frame, and there's no rack focus to keep him in frame. He goes out of focus, and then you dissolve to black. Mm-hmm. And then it just says 5 years later. Yeah. And the first time I saw that, my heart, I was like I couldn't believe it, because I'm like, I had I'm watching this movie because I was spoiler free. I was like jumping up and down going, this is like the greatest thing ever, because I've waited my whole life to see the villain succeed. And and it's funny, I didn't even think about this, so you brought this up, and he did. And I'm like, where are they? Was it 5 years? And I'm gonna get to see it now. Like, what happened? And it was great. This melancholy, like they show you Liberty Island, the Statue of Liberty with all the boats that are there, and everyone's just like, it's 5 years later, but they're still all shell shocked and depressed. I mean, I loved it, and we saw that Thanos was kicking it, in the garden spot of SETI Alpha 5, and it was awesome, and he was having a great time, and he succeeded, and so we got that. And then they couldn't leave well enough alone. Like they had to go back and try and fix things. When they could have, they would have eventually gotten over it and realized, well, half of us are still here. It'd be Shawshank Redemption. Get busy living or get busy dying. Sure shit, goddamn right. They would have Morgan Freeman that shit eventually.
And see, if you think about it, real quick, everything has a purpose, everything has a reason, right? So we think that when we're thinking about like shows like Loki, like, we're thinking about basically the time, the Time Authority and the TVA. And we're thinking about how we're told that anything out throughout history, if you change it, then you're changing the course of destiny. You're changing what is supposed to be. So technically what they did by rewriting history, by going back and changing the past, even though they were told that if you take the stones back, then, after you've done this, then no, technically you have changed, because what if people were meant to get wiped out? What if population was meant to get wiped out the way it was at that particular time? So no, when you go back and change it, you are changing the course of history, and you don't know what pockets of this universe you can open up. What, tyranny might have been on a planet that Thanos willingly wiped out and caused this planet peace, but then you bring on that back.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, there are repercussions because of this. So the heroes aren't always right. And the thing is, I like the simple fact that from both perspectives, we think that what the Avengers did was right. Thanos thinks that what he did was right, and a lot of people would probably side with him.
Yeah,
Same
because
thing, you know what I mean? So it makes, again, history was changed either way. There was no way around that. So things can only get worse.
yeah, I mean, so like to bring it back to Baylen Skoll.
Yeah.
So they're on the other side of the galaxy, and I keep thinking like I just love the fact you brought up the Avengers, because really when you think about it, the only reason like if half the population of the Earth disappeared tomorrow, and 5 years had went by, eventually you'd come to realize that they're not coming back, and even the Avengers had to, like, they're not coming back. And I'm like, why are you all morose? Why so serious? Like, why not? You guys could turn the Earth into like Party Central, where everybody could live in a great house. You've got all this real estate. You've got all these resources. Anybody could probably do any job they wanted because they all have to be filled. All the people that everybody that you complained about. You want to call. I want you to call me by my pronouns. Okay. You can be your pronouns, and everybody will call you that. You can do whatever you want. Like, the world would be in a great place but they chose to make it like a bad thing. Like, I would love to see a version of Endgame, now that I'm thinking about it, where it was a great thing. Like 5 years later, everything was great. The Earth was great. And that might even be worse, because then half of those people, well, it was good that we lost them all. And the whole different perspective, things are good from a certain point of view, like Ben Kenobi would say. So, oh yeah, go ahead.
Robert, I'm sorry. Tom Jr. Jackson wanted me to let you know that people are saying that there are commercials popping up during the stream tonight, and Tom also noticed it too. I told him I don't know why that would be happening, but yeah, that's what he wanted me to let you know.
That's weird.
Yeah, it is weird.
Well, I'll tell you something.
Weird on the pop up doing a live. That's weird.
YouTube is doing weird things. So I will go check on that, because that's bizarre. But like was what Thanos did really a bad thing? Because everyone's gonna die anyway. How many years did most people have? 50 tops. If you're a kid, if you disappeared as a kid, okay, that's too bad. You didn't get to live your life. But, I mean, we're all going to die, so Thanos' big thing would only last 60 or 70 years tops, and then people would forget about it. Mm-hmm. So was he really a bad guy?
I mean, the thing is, bro, like, I think bad, whether, our perception of, because the thing is I really didn't think about it this way until, like, my late 20s, to be quite honest, because I was always thinking about perception and how our perception of good and evil is sort of like, it is kind of, it's not twisted, but it's kind of confusing, because anything that we see, what we think is right may be wrong from a certain point of view. That's just how it always is, bro. And with Thanos, again, he felt as though there was a level of population control needed, for the galaxy, like, where everything was just too populated. The population was, eroding resources, like resources, things that we needed. Again, you're seeing famine. Like, if you think about it right now, like a location or, a state that's, for instance, I'll give you an example, Los Angeles, California, how we know that it is almost damn near overpopulated, just like New York, damn near overpopulated. I think pretty much a lot of these places are almost damn near overpopulated. That's why we see, a lot of, the homeless and people who can't really, there's a lot of, struggle out there, bro. So, and then right now we're already crying about resources. We're seeing that shit today. Gas prices going up, food's going up because there's, minimal there. You know, a lot of shit is actually happening, and you see it, and you know, it's just a level of population control. He basically just saw it from a certain point of view and just decided just to massacre everything with the snap of his finger. You know,
it wasn't inhumane. We just kind of came apart. No, Mr. Stark.
You know what I mean? Like it's just, again, bro. Like, I think that to him, in his mind, there were good intentions around it, because again, he naturally loved, you know, I mean, with the exception of like how he mistreated Gamora. I mean, not Gamora, Nebula. But he loved Gamora. He just felt as though that was, again, completing his destiny, was sacrifices were required. I mean, wiping out half the population, do I think is evil, especially with people that you love? Yeah, I'm still going to say that was evil. You know what I mean? Because if I'm sitting basically next to my dog or my wife or my girl or my mom, and I've seen them going and I'm still here, that's going to drive me insane. If my daughter goes, that's going to drive me insane. You know what I mean? Like, when I'm looking at that aspect of it, I'm like, damn. But say, for instance, I wasn't one of the ones in my family weren't the ones that were wiped away. How would I look at it then? From a selfish standpoint?
More for us.
You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? That's just how people would be. Fuck that, I survived. I don't give a fuck. But that's just how people would see that, bro. Like, that's real a fucked up way to look at it. But
well, I mean, no, it is. It is, and you know, if you think about it, like a certain point of view, Ben Kenobi even says it.
Yeah.
You know, Ben Kenobi's justifying his lying to Luke. I mean, Kenobi straight up lied to Luke. Well, from a certain point of view, I guess so. Yeah. You know, and I'm just curious. I mean, I think one of the problems with a lot of the ultimate evil, we're fighting the ultimate evil. And maybe this is something that I've always appreciated about Star Trek, like the characters, the alien characters that you ran across in Star Trek, they were never villains necessarily. I've always thought of them as antagonists.
Yeah.
You know, and like Thanos, it's interesting because Thanos, I keep thinking about the woman in Cronenberg's Videodrome, you know, don't look for it, Max. Videodrome is dangerous because it has a philosophy. And that's what it is. I mean, and I think that's what makes storytelling more interesting, is when you know when something has a philosophy. And I think that Star Wars, for me, as much as I love Star Wars from the time I was 10 years old, the one thing that became apparent with me as Star Wars went on and I read more of the books is they never really defined what the Sith wanted. You know, like when the Sith won, like, and if Palpatine and Dooku won, for instance, how would the everyman's life be different? Like, if you're like a normal dude on the ground in Coruscant and the Sith happen to win as opposed to the Jedi, how would your life change? And I think what was really interesting is you saw what happens. What I loved about Andor was you saw how, like, on the planet Andor was on, I forget the name of the planet, but you saw like there was workers there. You saw people going to work, and you saw people worried, and you saw the petty tyrannies that would happen when the Empire would just come and harass people on the streets. Or you saw what happened to Andor himself when he was on Space Tel Aviv, you know, and he comes running out, and like the droid just apprehends him and throws him in jail, you know, only in a fascistic society. And you saw how bad the Empire was to the normal workaday person. And you that's one of the things I really loved about Andor, is you really had an understanding of how bad the Empire was for the man on the street, the normal workaday person. And it was horrible. And, you know, we saw examples of it all the time in the 20th century with totalitarian regimes. So it really, to me, one of the things that Andor did was it added to my understanding of the Star Wars universe.
See, you know what? That's the crazy part, though, Rob, because when we think of Andor, when I think of Andor, I think of the benchmark of how excellent Star Wars is. Yep. And the art of storytelling, and how the focus is on character development, and how we love these characters, how we move with these characters. But then you would get a group of people that would look at that and be like, that's not Star Wars to me. It's too philosophical. It's too much conversations going on. We're looking at the working class. There's not shoot 'em up powers, punches and powers. Like, I don't understand that. That's not Star Wars for me. And I'm like, well, how is it not? Because you're not seeing those things, because you're seeing a totally different side of it. We're seeing the Empire the way we wanted to see it. If they were bad, we wanted to know how bad they really were. So we're getting a chance to basically see that now through the album of Andor. And, I think that's the aspect of it. Look, but when it comes to Star Wars, the way I do is I compartmentalize. Look, you have Andor, you have The Mandalorian, you have Ahsoka, you have the sequel trilogies, you have the OT trilogies, you have the prequels. A lot of things are compartmentalized for us. A lot of people will say that 4, 5, and 6 is the best Star Wars that we've ever had in history. Well, the thing is, okay, I can look at that and be like, okay, that shaped my imagination. It shaped my way of seeing things, especially in this world, and my creativity. I look at those films and I'm like, I love them, and I watch them anytime they're on. That is just my life. But to basically be naive and say that, okay, there weren't people that disliked these films, I would only say that because back then I hadn't heard it. There was no, there was no social media. There wasn't YouTube. There wasn't things. So we didn't hear the masses the way we hear it now. But what if we had everything that we have now then? What do you think the outcry would be? Would we still look at it the same? Would everybody still look at the same? Or would we hear people vocally saying it was trash, I didn't like anything about it, or whatever? We would probably hear more complaints about it then than we do now. Would it have taken on the shape that it has now if we had social media, if we had all of this stuff back then in the day? Do you think that it would have been the same, that Star Wars, we would see it the same, and society would see it the same now? Because right now, for the Star Wars that we're getting now, bro, people are really, really more vocal about it, about what they really, really don't like. And, rightfully so, everybody can have an opinion, and that's just the way it's supposed to be. We're not always supposed to agree on things, and I understand that. But what I'm saying is, if we had social media back in the 70s, the late 70s going into like the 80s and 90s, how would everything have been? How do you think Star Wars would have been perceived then?
Well, what's interesting to me is if I have to use myself as an example, because when I saw Star Wars when I was 10 years old in 1977, the weekend it opened, it was life-changing, because it's hard to imagine, but there was nothing in all of cinema history since the dawn of cinema that was analogous to Star Wars at all. You could say there's lots of fairy tales and things, but Star Wars, not the special edition, the original Star Wars as it came out in 1977, with all of its special effects, was very. If you watch the first hour of Star Wars, is not exactly the most. It opens. It's got a banger of an opening with C-3PO and R2 leaving the blockade runner, but then it slows down, and it world builds. And it shows you this world of Tatooine, which is a shithole. They're moisture farmers. I can't even imagine a worse job than that. And Luke is a disaffected teenager. All of his friends are gone. He's working for his old uncle, and his uncle's a worrywart because of the things that they haven't told Luke and what can possibly happen. But there's a realism to it. There's a naturalism to it. And even though, we end up meeting Tusken Raiders, and R2-D2 leaves to find Ben Kenobi, and there's C-3PO, the way it's presented, there's not a lot of stuff in the sky. You see the second twin-setting sun, but it's done very realistically. So you really feel like you're in the middle of nowhere with this poor kid, and he's going through the motions, but it's all. What was so great about it was, you're on another planet you've never been in before. Everything looks alien. The huts look alien where they live. Everything is alien, and it felt real. And Star Wars had a very naturalistic feel. And if you watch Star Wars, it doesn't work. The part of the reason the special editions don't work for me, especially the special edition of Star Wars, I cannot watch, because I'd seen Star Wars so many times. When I get to Jabba the Hutt, the effects the effects are not good, because 1977 or 1997. And
Yeah.
the movie never had CG in it because that CG didn't even exist when they made the movie. So when I watch the special edition, I can't look at it because it doesn't belong. And I understand, I won't get into a philosophical debate, but the realism, like when they went to Mos Eisley, and it was a shithole Texas truck stop in the middle of East Texas somewhere. But now in 97, suddenly there's Rontos, and I've said this before, but there's Jawas and all this crap flying in the sky. And even the moment when Ben Kenobi says, you don't need to see his identification, there's droids flying through the air. So the reality that Star Wars gave me, it was very grounded, and everything felt very real. And then when you get into Empire Strikes Back, the whole opening, like you're in a base on a glacier, there's real danger. The way General Reichian says, Death Mark's not an easy thing to live with, Solo. You're a good fighter. I hate to lose you. Even the way he talks, he's like a real guy. Like, I know that guy. I might have seen that guy on the nightly news. So everything in Star Wars, for me, in Star Wars and Empire, was very realistic. Even like when Lando's walking down the hall in Cloud City, he's talking about being an administrator and, sure, I'm responsible. He's having these conversations that set firmly in the real world. And then the beginning with Jedi, by the time you get to the prequel trilogy, there's no real world at all. It's all Fantasyland. And I don't mean fantasy. I mean, it looks like Fantasyland. Naboo looks like a painting off a prog rock record from 1976. I mean, it's no longer workaday people. You start with the Jedi. You meet Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. And so there's no more real world. And I'm talking about the aesthetics, and I'm talking about the design of it all, because now we have CG, even the creature design. Like, you would never have seen a creature that looked like Sebulba in the original three. Although I would say Return of the Jedi was the beginning of the end of all that. But the way Sebulba was designed, he's not a real world character. He's only a character that you could have designed in the computer. Ben Quadneros, all the pod racers. So Star Wars moved. It went from being this space fantasy that worked because it was grounded. You believed these amazing worlds, these space. You believed it all. Return of the Jedi changed that for me personally. Star Wars and Empire, to me, changed my life. I saw Empire Strikes Back 26 times.
So you feel as though the spectacle took away. So when it became more of a spectacle and less about the writer's interpretation and realism.
No, well, yes, but it was the
special effects. When they added
it was verisimilitude. Like verisimilitude to me, because even things like they had so many special effects they had to make in Jedi. There's a lot of really sloppy and, dare I say it, not good visual effects in Jedi, and they do things like R2 and 3PO fall into the sand, and then their legs are sticking up out of the sand. It's goofy. I mean, that was a goofy thing. And even from the beginning of Jedi, when 3PO walks up to Jabba's palace and taps on the door, that's a set. That big door is a set. They're no longer outside. If that had been shot in the first movie, they would have been outside. They would have built that door. It would have been outside in the sunlight. You can tell the lighting in Jedi is off. It doesn't have the real tangible quality of it all. But that's just more of a... But when you get into the prequel trilogy, because they have such a reliance on CG backgrounds, it's like they didn't go to real locations and shoot anymore. And one of the things that I loved about Andor so much was they shot most of that shit in Europe. They went and they would go to a real location, like here's a dam, but then they would put a turbo laser in the front of the dam, but it would be a real dam. So the way they moved the camera, and they had real lighting and all that, you're no longer on these virtual sets and virtual environments, and it felt real. Like when Andor's running around that town that's where he was living before he left, they were on a big, gigantic, like blocks long set that they were shooting on. There was no volume. There was no blue screen back or green screen background. So it felt real. And the concerns of the characters, like Mon Mothma, I felt for her. I was like in a John le Carré novel or watching a show where this woman's like playing both sides against the middle, and at any minute she can be discovered, and maybe her husband's going to sell her out. And then there's the Empire and people that are looking for that. Like I was truly scared for her. You know, scared for her as a human being. I'm like, not just because I thought she was hot, but I'm like, hey, Mom, Armand, I really hope, I fear for you. And I feared for her the way I had not felt for a character. Come on, I hate that. But the I feared for her. And I had emotions in Star Wars, like when Luthen says that great line, I'm fighting for a sunset, or I'm fighting for a sunrise I'll never see.
Yeah.
You know, that's one of the great. And if a character had said that in a World War II movie, I would have been, yeah, man, that was awesome. And that I believed that Luthen was a real guy. You know, he wasn't a Star Wars character. He was a real human being that lived in a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And I believed in his plight. And when he pulled that shit against that Star Destroyer, you know, and used the countermeasures, and I'm like, that's some cool ass shit. But now, like when I watch Ahsoka and to a certain extent all the Disney Plus shows that are shot on the like the character of Boba Fett was badass in Mandalorian season 2. Loved him. He was so, when he has the gaffy sticks and he's just wrecking stormtroopers and wrecking those fools, I'm like, this is fucking awesome. And then when you get to Book of Boba Fett, he suddenly isn't acting like a, well, quote unquote, a Mandalorian, a human being anymore. It's very more heightened, more like Saturday morning cartoon sensibility. And that's for me has been really difficult to take. And with Ahsoka, I am not tethered. I don't know what I'm supposed to think or feel or where I'm going to wind up with these characters, because I don't know their motivations and I don't know what's happening. So I can't, it's hard for me to tune in on, to gravitate. Whereas with Andor, you know, I felt like I was watching a great spy thriller. If Andor was not a Star Wars show, I think it still would have been a compelling program.
I think it's interesting that Mon Mothma had to make a deal with the devil, if you will, in order to continue down the path that she's going on. She had no choice. There was no one else to work with. And I don't believe that this man is going to do anything but just mess up her family. I think that it's not going to be like, well, they just had this deal, you know, his son meets her daughter. I think he's really going to mess her up badly. And that's just another burden that she has to bear. You know, she had to make sure that she wasn't found out right now, because she has so much more important work, but it was at the sacrifice of her own daughter and her family.
Yeah, which from a human perspective and from a storytelling perspective is shattering. You know, to see her own family turn against her, not knowing what she's really trying to do, which is protect all of them, but they can never know. And that to me is great storytelling. And that's why the difference between someone like Tony Gilroy, who's an Academy Award winning screenwriter, and what he's bringing to the Star Wars universe was very much, he's bringing great tragedy and great, he's harking back to, like I said, John le Carré spy thrillers and things that, whereas I feel that what's missing from like Book of Boba Fett or Ahsoka is those influence from outside of Star Wars, that like George Lucas going to Kurosawa or something like that. And I it's interesting because, like you were saying, Lael, it's a point of view thing, and it's also where you're coming from, and the fact that there's different story tones in all of these different shows.
Yeah, I think again, I will agree that, and I've said this before, and it's not even just with Star Wars, bro. I think it's with any film nowadays, any science fiction film, you know, anything that's a big budget. I think that a lot of storytelling is being sacrificed for, you know, explosions and CG, and they want these non-practical settings. I think a lot of it literally is true, really, really good writing, good direction is being sacrificed because of that. And we have seen that for so many years with different films, bro. Like I've always said it, like the 80s was the best time for filmmaking, because around 80s and in the 80s, like literally you relied strictly on the script and the actors conveying that script. You didn't have like these big huge budgets. That's why, like I said, the original, a lot of people, it's divisive for some, but the original Blade Runner to me is historically a classic. I've loved that film all my life, bro. Like, there's Star Wars, and then for me, it's always Blade Runner, the first Blade Runner film, because I love that film. And I think that even the writing there was just so phenomenal, because you felt a lot of sympathy and empathy for the replicants. You know what I mean? So again, I think now a lot of that, and even like with new interpretations or even sequel interpretations of films that we've seen in the past, have suffered, bro, because again, everybody's all about making this big budget. We want to make these really cinematically, extraordinary films. Like, all right, I'll give you an example, bro. Last night, I went to go see The Creator.
Mm-hmm.
I literally love that film, bro. The reason why I loved it is because of the subject matter, but also the way it was shot was beautiful. I just thought that it was excellent. It was an excellent film.
Well,
I loved it.
Do you know what they did with that movie, which is fascinating? And so it was basically shot backwards in a way, sort of, where they just went to like Vietnam and Southeast Asia, and they just went out and shot the actors on real locations, and use everything that entails with the light of a real location, and then ILM put everything in later.
Yeah.
And so you had the verisimilitude. Can you imagine if rather than work on volume sets, where where you literally could actually move the camera wherever you could point the camera in whatever direction you wanted to, and it's so you're getting, and that movie was only but it was $80 million. And I think that movie but by the way, it's not doing well.
I know it's not, which I'm not, put it this way, bro. As good as it is to me, and it was to me, I'm surprised it's not. I'm not surprised it's not doing well, because the thing is, bro, I think across the board, just for maybe a few exceptions, it's going to be a long time before we see billion-dollar films again, bro, like that.
Oh, I
think it's going to be a long time, bro.
I agree, but also if you're going to make a movie like that, The Creator is a terrible title. It's a terrible title. While it might have worked for the story and the movie that's being told, that it's
based off an actual book.
It's so generic.
Yeah.
And it's so, what is is that God? I mean, with the AI, obviously, but The Creator is just a generic title. It doesn't even give you a sense of what kind of, is it a movie about monks? Is it about a religious order? Like, what is it about? So, and most people, we're aware of it because we're in the YouTube film space, but the general public, if I was going to go to my mom and go, hey mom, let's go see a movie this weekend. Okay, Bob, what do you want to see? Oh, I want to see The Creator. Oh, is it a biblical movie? What's it about? I mean, it doesn't, Blade Runner, that's a fucking title.
Yeah.
Because you're like, what is that? Is that an ice skating movie? But those two words together work pretty well.
Yeah, the marketing on The Creator, I don't think it really lived up to the feel of the film. And I think, we've seen this be a problem, especially over the last few years. I think they needed to take a different approach. And to be honest with you, I think quite a bit of it is a love story. And you don't know that. You wouldn't even have a sense that there's that has anything to do with anything. A lot of the story is actually about love, and that just doesn't come across in any of the marketing. So when you see the advertisement and you kind of see this incredible, you know, let's say child that looks like he is part, you know, machine and part, let's say, flesh and blood, you don't really know if he's a cyborg. You don't know if he's a full robot. You don't really know what he is. So I think that was also something that they should have focused a little bit more on, in the sense of saying, is it possible? Is it possible to love something that you can build? And, you know, can that level of creation make you, you know, fall in love with something that didn't exist, you know, some kind of.
Well, you're talking about what Blade Runner does too. Is the whole thing about Blade Runner, and the reason that movie works so well. I mean, to be honest, I don't think Blade Runner is necessarily a particularly great movie, but it's a great vision. And
Yes.
when you get to the speech and you've seen what's gone on,
I disagree. I thought it was a great movie, Rob.
Well, no. I mean, look, it's. I think it's a classic, but
No, I got you.
but when you get to the end of that movie and Rutger Hauer gives that speech, you know, I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. I've seen attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. You know, nowadays somebody would probably say, can we have flashbacks? Can we actually see what he's talking about? But but the thing about that movie is it's about these artificially created people that have souls. You know, and we see through the course of the film, you know, it starts out with Roy saying, "Did you get your precious photos?" And even though Roy Batty probably knows that those photos are a bunch of bullshit, he knows what they mean to Leon. You know, and he knows that this is what it has imbued all of them with life. And the importance of that is that Harrison Ford's character recognizes at the end of the movie, not that you need me to explain all this to you, but that these people, these replicants, have more soul and are more alive than even he is. You know, and the question then remains, what is a soul? What is humanity? What is life? You know, and who cares? I don't know how much time we have left. You know, but he fell in love with Rachel because even though she was an artificially created person, she has a soul. You know, and that's a fascinating, and we're going to have to deal. That's always been the underlying principle of any artificial intelligence or any, you know, when we create a machine intelligence, that's the underlying, can man become a creator? You know, can we create life?
And they could have called it the creation, you know, or something like that. And it would take the focus off of the creator, because you don't necessarily, I don't think the film necessarily brings you onto the side of the creator. What it does is that it focuses more on what they created. And it was like, I don't want to spoil everything, and I'm not going to, but the point is that the title wants you to focus on an individual who, you know, I don't think they necessarily sway you to their side. They want you to care about something, but that's not what's in the title. So, you know, and of course, that's the thing you see walking across the screen. You know, you don't see the creator necessarily, or it's not necessarily focused on well enough. And I think if they had applied a little bit more mysticism and a little bit more focus on this creation, why this is so special, why that creation, why, you know, why should I be falling in love or even look at that? I think then from a perspective of, you know, when you're sitting in the theater and you do see those types of you know, trailers, then maybe it would hook more people to see this film.
You know what, and I will agree with you on the fact that, because I seeing the film, honestly, watching the trailers, and it's not a really spoiler, but I didn't even know Gemma, what's her name, is Gemma Tran?
Gemma Chan. Yeah,
she's not in the trailers.
I didn't know she was in the film.
First of all, if Gemma Chan's in your movie, you should put her front and center everywhere.
Bro, and that's my point. Like, literally, if she's in the movie, coming off of films that she's basically been in where she's killed it. Hell,
It's a
she
love
was
story.
the lead in the Eternals. She's been like really the focus. I mean, she was in
Crazy Rich Asians. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, she was not in the trailers at all. You know what I mean? And I think that if they would have depicted it that way, that sort of like a love story, and we do find out, not to kind of give it away to anybody else, why she's important, why he's important, and why the creation is important. We find that out in the film, but you're right. The marketing did not serve its purpose as to conveying that or getting us to that point. And I think if they did that, they would have probably had a bit more of a success. Now, I'm not saying that it would have made $1 billion because, again, like I said, every film right now is going to struggle. But I feel as though if they would have conveyed that, if that would have been the connective tissue for audience to kind of draw in and be like, wait a minute, oh, okay, she's in it. Okay, this is what it could be about. It would have, for me, I think it would have went somewhere. But I mean, I still love the film. Don't get me wrong, I loved it, bro. But yeah, I think it's going to suffer because of the marketing.
Well, and
Big
also, what's really interesting? Audiences today are really savvy, especially when it comes to science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And an audience, we already know all these tropes. We know about robots that look like humans. We know Battlestar Galactica. We know Cylons. We know replicants. We know synths. We know data. We know all this stuff is already in the pop culture lexicon.
Yeah.
And the audience already knows this shit. You know what the problem is? The problem is if you go into a room with a studio executive and not to or anyone you're pitching to, if you go into this room, or they don't know because they're not geeks and they don't. So they're going to, well, how are people going to know that it's an artificial like this or that? Are people going to get it?
Yeah.
We know. Yeah, dumbass. I know you went to an Ivy League, you're an Ivy League educated business degree guy. But if you don't get that already, and this is one of the frustrating, it's always been the frustrating thing about, there's nothing worse. I cannot convey the singular frustration of going in and pitching a science fiction, horror, or fantasy project to an executive who doesn't understand the genre or is not well versed in it. Because you realize that you use, like, we understand if you're talking about a monster, we all know, like, take your pick. If you want to talk about werewolves, or I thought Brett Pierce was in the wretched, the witch creature, talk about whatever you want. We all get it. Like, if I were to kind of pitch this, if I'm like, here's my new idea, I've got a great new horror film, I could pitch it to this audience who's watching this show right now. Everybody would get it. People are like, yeah, man, that sounds great. Awesome. We talk about robots or artificial intelligence, and everybody would get it. The people who are the marketing people who are probably coming up with the trailers and all the marketing stuff on this movie were probably like, how are we going to do this? Like, they don't know. The people at Warner Brothers, the marketing department at Warner Brothers thinks that Inception was a big hit because they figured out a way, well, this movie's impossible to market. How we can't market this? And it's like, man, and by the way, they did do a good campaign, but the reason that people went and saw Inception was because it was good, but still, and also Christopher Nolan, but it had concepts, and that movie, by the way, is a melancholy story. I love Inception. It is a melancholy story about a man who can't get over his dead wife.
Yep.
That's what that movie's about. Take away everything else, it's about a man that is haunted by the memory of his dead wife, and all this other Sturm and Drang that happens is great, and I love it all. But at Inception, bro, dude, I love Inception. I saw it 8 times.
Inception. Tenet is a different story, bro. I couldn't. A part of Tenet's problem to me basically was not only it not saying it was the. Bro, it was a sound because I couldn't hear him talking.
Right.
I couldn't hear. It was too. But I was trying to wrap my head around certain things in Tenet that I think it got really, by the end of it, like it was just too philosophical for me, bro. I was like, oh shit, I'm losing it. But I kind of understood where they were going with it. But it was just all over the place.
You know what Tenet did? I think Tenet, and I think it's the one Christopher Nolan movie that just doesn't work.
Yeah.
I like watching it, but
Yeah.
it's playing with a science fiction trope, which is time travel.
Yeah,
in such a way that no one's ever seen before, and we spend our whole time asking ourselves, wait a minute, how does time travel work in this universe? We don't know. And why is it people are literally running backwards as if they're on tape? Like people wouldn't move backwards if they're traveling through time. It's not like, because as we know it, you're not, when you go back in time, it's like the old Superman the movie paradox. I never realized, even as a kid, I understood that when you see the world going back in time, that's just a visual expression that Richard Donner used. Superman's going really fast. The Earth does not stop and go backwards. That is a visual representation of Superman himself traveling through time. But I've had people, I realize that people are like, well, he spun the world back, and I'm like,
no, it was
it's a visual representation of him traveling through time.
It's just basically showing you that he's going back in time.
Yes, there are people.
It's not that the Earth spinning causes it. And I knew that, bro. Back
when I was a kid, I knew that when I was a kid. Bro. I tell you, even to this day, there's probably somebody watching the stream right now going, "No, man, he spun the world back." I never. To this day, I always meet people and go, bro, well, yeah, it's part of his powers, man. He spun the world back.
I remember that in the theaters, bro. I'm trying to explain it to people. I'm sitting up there as a kid, bro, and I'm looking at even my dad, bro. My dad was like, yeah, how is he spinning? I was like, no, me at a young age, I'm like, no, he's just going back in time. Like it's how we're supposed to perceive time travel is, through that. It's not like it's just a reversal of time. It's his perception. We're not seeing that happen on Earth. It's just what's happening.
Right. So, and I mean, they show stuff go backwards, and I get all that. But even as like I said, even as a kid, I and right now, I'm sure there's some executive in Hollywood who's never seen Superman the movie. And he's going to sit down and watch Superman the movie, and at the end, he's going to go. He's going to be perplexed, or she's going to be perplexed, and go in and tell their colleague on Monday morning, "Yeah, I watched that old Superman movie from '78. I thought it was really weird how he spun the world back. That was kind of odd. I don't know if I liked it. I didn't believe it."
Yeah, it's just. I think the biggest thing is it wasn't explained. You know what I mean? So the unexplained and the interpretation that what we see and what other people see is going to be like, well, he spun the world back in time. He just went in reverse. It's just like he was going super fast, but you couldn't. Yeah, bro.
But
that's crazy. That is crazy.
There's also the concern that a lot of normies are not well versed in what artificial intelligence is.
Yeah,
that's not anything that they have an easy time explaining to anyone. And many of them, I'm not going to say that it's wrong, but many of them don't care. So, they go into a film and they don't really see the difference between a robot and, let's say, artificial intelligence. So going into a film like The Creator might also be a stretch, because we do see examples of both in the film. And you're supposed to understand that there's a difference between one and the other. But I don't know, whether that's necessarily clear for the average normie.
Let me ask you this question, though. Do you think with the current status of how the world is interpreted, like you just now said, how people are basically seeing artificial intelligence, we got that going on in the strikes with both the writer's strike and the actor's strike. Do you think that because the artificial intelligence aspect of it was at the forefront, people were like, no, I'm not supporting this film?
Yes, I do. I think that it's going to cause tension, and a lot of people are going to look at it and say, I don't really support, the peacemakers versus the troublemakers, whoever you want to put, whatever tag you want to put on them, antagonist, protagonist. I think there's going to be a lot of people coming out of that and saying, I can't believe that the bad guys won, or it's kind of like the opposite of Terminator. Like the anti-Terminator film where things are, reversed, and, that's how I think people would say. I'm not that excited for them to, for us to have a peaceful resolution. They've overstepped their boundaries, and that's what happens when you overstep your boundary.
But I also think, though, that we also are a very savvy audience that's seen artificial representations of artificial human beings, like I said, even in C-3PO. Maria, all the way back to Metropolis in 1927. But we've seen Battlestar Galactica. We've seen Heart Beeps or Bicentennial Man. Or, there's been so many depictions of artificial intelligence on or robotic or non-human. Look at Spielberg's AI.
Or iRobot. Well, Spielberg's AI was a little different, I think. And I think this could have been as effective as Spielberg's AI. And I'm going to say, when I saw this film, I was expecting to go down that road with the Spielberg's AI, but I didn't go down that journey. I think because the state in which, let's say, Earth, or wherever this place is supposed to be, Earth was at, is not the same state in which the Earth is at in The Creator. So, right. and once again, AI focuses on the robot AI versus the person who built the AI.
Right.
And
yeah.
So that also separates you a little bit from an emotional attachment to what's been created when it's not the title of the movie, in a sense,
And you know what? I felt, without giving it away, I'll just say, like, a certain character's arc would have been so much more interesting if we would have seen what really happened to him in the very beginning and why he basically joined, this.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I wanted to see that. If we would have basically got a chance to see him progress to this point, and the reason why he stood for the side that he stood on in the very beginning before he found this person, and how, I wanted to see more of what happened to him instead of that just being glossed over. You know what I mean? Because the infiltration part was kind of, we missed that. You know what I mean? It was just whatever. So there was more I wanted to see of that aspect of it that we didn't get a chance to see. But I mean,
right.
That's a good point. It would have been nice to know a little bit more about him. And the
like how again, because we get a chance to see bits and pieces of how he met, whatever. But I wanted to see that development over time, so we can basically, you become more interested in that character's journey, and I wanted to sympathize more. I think that slightly was lost for me because I didn't get that full connection. Other than that, though, everything else I thought, was definitely decent, man. And honestly, I'll just say this: when it comes to Jim and Trent, I would have quit my job. I'd have been like, I'm not. Nope, y'all. Nope, I'm done. I'm not. I'm with the cause. Y'all can go ahead. You know what I mean?
And he's a fascinating character too. Yeah. So, you do have you instantly like him. And that's something that I have to say, even as an actor, it's not easy to get, people to instantly like your character. This was somebody who you were like, even despite the fact that we didn't have that build up, you still liked him. And it was like, there's something about this. And you knew there was a little bit more, right, Lael? You knew there was a little bit more to this story. But we, of course, they provided to us as much as they could because there was a lot in this film. There was a lot. They did not skimp on anything. But, for what it was, it would have been nice to have known that. But he played the role so well.
He did. Like, literally, like, it's such a talented family, man.
Yes.
Such a talented family that he comes from. So,
yeah.
Again, it was, the thing is, I mainly wanted to see Garrett Edwards, get a win and show what he can really, really do. And again, I loved his film Monster. I loved that
This
film.
had a lot of the way this was made had a lot of monster,
Yeah, bro.
going over the
It
border
did.
and
It
shooting.
did. It
Yeah,
did.
and that was, it's funny because if you think about it, he's made 4 movies and had 4 wins.
Yeah, bro.
Because,
Yeah.
he did Monster, he did Godzilla, he did Rogue One, and yeah, Rogue One had its production issues, and he did bring in Tony Gilroy to help
Wasn't
him
his
and all
fault.
that.
Wasn't his
Yeah,
fault.
yeah, yeah.
I'll
Well,
put
and
nobody's fault.
and he made this for on a budget. I mean, I want to see this. They say it's going to do better overseas, but I think making more thoughtful movies like this, I want to see more and more of them, because in a way, like for instance. Whenever I look at movies now, like something like The Creator, I always think to myself, I wish Star Wars and both Star Trek and Star Wars was more like this. And I'm not saying that I don't want, I still want, there to be Jedi. And when I say I want to feel from Star Wars the way I felt watching a movie like The Creator, because when I go back and watch Empire Strikes Back, the reason that I watched that movie 26 times in the theater, the reason I kept going back the summer of 1980 is because it was a total balls to the wall fantasy film that felt real. The people, the way they acted and the way they talked to each other and all that, it felt, even though it was totally obviously fantastical, it felt real. I mean, even when Lord Vader, we've come out of blah, 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 and you failed me for the last time. Even even the Imperial officers that he chokes to death, they all felt like real guys right out of a war movie that isn't necessarily a Star Wars movie. It felt naturalistic and real. Whereas, like, you look at The Creator, even though there's lots of special effects in it, I felt the characters, Ken Watanabe,
Yes.
you feel like because you like that guy. And he adds a real gravitas to it, and he's allowed to talk like a real person with dialogue and things like that. And I miss that from modern Star Wars and modern Star Trek, because they're all to me now so contrived. Like because Star Wars began its life, we went to Tunisia and shot in the real desert. And you have these long, lengthy shots when a land speeder's zipping by. It's against a real desert landscape. And The Creator, because they've shot it in Southeast Asia, felt like that. They're on real locations, beautiful. And it was stunning. It's real places. And I think that Star Wars especially, like, they went to Norway and shot on a glacier. And they augmented those things, certainly, but but when you saw those rebel troops take position when the walkers started coming at them, it felt real.
But you know what?
This as well.
I want to see, when I see The Creator, the first thing that I thought about was, I want to see Garrett Edwards do a Terminator film. Literally. If he can give a Terminator film the same level of emotion that I felt from this film, because I'm not gonna tell you, it was moments in it, I'm not gonna hold you, bro, I literally teared up so many times in this film, just because of the love aspect, just because of the connection between a father and just that connection, just feeling that, and that there was risk and that people were really, really trying to survive. I would want to see that in a Terminator film. And I think that if they can do a Terminator film like this, bro, I mean, you have the all-out war, but that war felt fucking real in Creator. It did. It felt so real. What I mean? Like, you see in those machines, that tank of a behemoth type of thing, just, bro, it was phenomenal. And the feeling, and tell me, and not to give something away, but there's a certain scene, y'all both know what I'm thinking about, when they were on a dock and you seen something running and you seen it running. Bro, I'm sitting there because you can feel the stomps in the theater. You can feel the running and the pressure and the tension, knowing that what's going to happen, and even the hesitation of this thing at first. But it was like, bro, I never pictured so much tension and emotion in one shot Like just feeling that tension in that one shot, I was like, "Oh my god!" Like
Yeah.
this, something is not gonna go right. But hearing the stomps and hearing the running, bro, it was phenomenal, bro. Like if I played back that scene in my head, and I'm just like, "Yo, that was terrifying." Just that one scene was terrifying.
Yeah, well, and the thing is that kind of feeling, which is a combination of the reality of what you're watching, the fact you bought into it, the way it's executed, made you believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, to me, I'm always banging on about verisimilitude, but that was it.
Yeah.
That was the verisimilitude and the thing is, for me, Star Wars was the ultimate franchise in fantasy verisimilitude. When that movie first came out, I think part of the reason it literally, and people forget this, it captivated the world. I mean, Star Wars was because you believed it. And yeah, you look back at it now and you can recognize, okay, these are model shots and stuff. But when that fucking Star Destroyer showed up at the beginning of Star Wars, people were like, oh my God, like, this is amazing. And then when you cut into the Rebel blockade runner and, you know, the everyone's running around because they're being boarded, all of the look of that, it was lit as if it was a real place. It wasn't lit like we have to make it look like sci-fi. It looked like you were on a military vessel. It had that reality. And dudes are running around and they looked like, and what was really interesting, so you have all that verisimilitude, then you have 3PO and R2, you know, and 3PO is like, did you hear that? With his little fey English accent. That was the fantasy part. But by putting them in this, in the midst of all of this, we recognize the battle. We recognize what's going on. Because it all looks so real, when you see R2 and 3PO, you immediately accept them because it's called Star Wars, and they're having this ridiculous conversation like this metal man and this garbage can that's on wheels, and you completely believe it because it's made you believe it because everything else seems so believable. And that's the trick. And I think nowadays a movie like Creator also had that ability. It made you believe because it was shot on location. The visual effects are incredible, but then you can start seeing human heads that have holes in them, you know, and you see the different, and you buy into it. That's something that both Star Wars and Star Trek have lost. And I think part of because it's expensive to make Star Wars, Andor had it. But these other movies where they're literally shooting in Manhattan Beach. They're shooting inside in a studio. They're not going anywhere, and so you might not register it, but once one thing doesn't have to be real, it's like a cascading effect, and that's the thing that I think is a bummer.
Yeah, and then it also increases the price, though, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, to go on location actually would probably be more expensive. I mean, it would be.
Yeah, because then you have to create bigger practical sets to cover a certain landscape.
Well, I thought it was a volume set, no?
Well, yeah, it's volume. Like on Andor, they didn't use the volume at all. They went to real. They augmented real locations, and they did a phenomenal job on doing that. And the creator, basically, they were on real locations, and then they put all the effects in after the fact. So you got the real world photography, and then because now we have the tracking software and all the CG, the ability of us to be able to generate effects like that are amazing, and it's all based on the real world. Now, I would love to see a Star Wars movie or a Star Wars TV show done like the creator, but it's expensive. And the thing is, they work with a small crew. They run and gun and get all that live action stuff, so they can spend all the time on post later.
Yeah, it's so. All right, since we're here, I'm going to ask this question now, Rob. Do you think, now that the the writer strike is over,
and the actor strike is going to be over too.
So the actor strike, they're meeting on Monday, right?
Yeah. Well, because now they have to get back. I mean, the actor strike, I think, will be easier to solve the issues. So I think they're going to get back to work.
Okay. So with that being said, do you think that we're going to get more emotion and more tightly written scripts than we have ever before? Or do you think it's just now? No, here's the thing. I know going into this, it's going to take more time. I know that right now, this is just okay. The agreement was made, whatever, but we're going to feel like a really dormant state for at least a year and a half, bro. That's the way I feel.
Yeah, well, there's going to be, yeah. I mean, look, I think the real problem when it comes to writing is, and on one hand, we're getting some of the best television writing, whether you're watching The Bear, whether you're, take your pick on there's so much great TV being written, but there's also a lot of mediocre stuff being written too.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Do you think it's going to get better, or do you think it's just going to remain the same?
I think one of the real problems with writing today in general is that, especially people that get into television writing, I really do think there is a lack of literature, and there is a lack of teaching. Call it the classics, call it what you want, but all storytelling, human storytelling, is ancient. And a lot of what our stories come from, I've often said, and I've said it on my channel, I'm like, if you want a real understanding of how stories are told in the West, you have to have knowledge of scripture. And I'm not saying, like, look, whether you believe in God or not, whatever your religious beliefs are, I don't care. That doesn't mean you can't read the Bible, because so much of the Western canon of literature and so much of our storytelling comes out of the Old and the New Testament. The tales that were told have been used as the basis for so many stories over time. And then, those stories get spun out into novels, or, like, I'm obsessed. If somebody said to me, and I don't know what the story is, I love the story of Job. I identify with the story of Job. I'd love to make a modern movie about Job, about a guy today who's Job, who gets tested, who doesn't give up his faith, and I love that story.
Go to Angel Studios, Robert. Go to Angel Studios.
Yeah, I'll go to Angel Studios and pitch my Job story. And Robert Heinlein wrote Job, A Comedy of Justice. But so a lot of people, I think the real problem with writing today is people who are writing in media, meaning film and television, and not everybody, but don't have the classical literary background that writers had 50 years ago. They grew up watching TV, and that's what they know. But I think that the mechanics of storytelling, just like language, the mechanics of language, you really have to. There's a book, the Strunk and White's The Elements of Style. It's a little book, but when I was like in college and high school, I had the elements of style, and I was always referring to it about how do you structure a sentence correctly? How do you use adverbs and verbs together? I mean, it was a little tiny book, but it's the basis of the English language, and it shows you how to write. Strunk and Wright's The Elements of Style, and Strunk and White's Strunk and White's The Elements of Style. And it was essential. It was an essential tool. I don't even know if people know what that book is anymore. And that's why it's a weird thing. Like I just think people's education in terms of I keep hearing stories about how nobody teaches books in high school anymore. Like they read articles. Like I read books in high school that changed my life.
Bro, when I found out that they don't even write in cursive anymore in high school or in schools, I was like, what?
I know.
Literally, bro, they don't teach them signatures or anything like that anymore, bro. They don't.
I mean, and here's the funny thing about writing in cursive.
Yeah. When
you're writing in cursive, there's a connection between your brain and what you're writing, and it's also how you think. Because when it's script, when you're writing in script, there's all these things going on in your mind that we don't even understand what you're learning at the time when you're doing all of that.
Yeah.
All of those things that helped critical thinking skills have all been swept away. And you know why they don't teach cursive? because other than once you learn to write it, it has no bearing on tests. It has no bearing on performance. It has no bearing because it's like learning the alphabet, learning language. There's no money in it. And it used to be that the value of an education, first of all, is priceless. And second of all, it was the collective, not all of this collective knowledge working together in a brain is what makes people smart, makes them critical thinkers. All of that's been taken out of our education system. And we're seeing the results of it. I mean, we're seeing people, it's frightening how little people actually know. Just in general. You know, I was talking with somebody about this the other day. I was like, kids don't drive anymore. You know, they Uber. They don't, at least when we turn 16, you get your driver's license. But the thing is, when you learn to drive, it's not just learning how to drive. It's everything that goes along with driving. Like, for instance, just the skill set of understanding, okay, I'm merging onto a freeway. I'm gauging how fast the traffic's going to go. I know how many feet I have in front of me. I can make all these judgment calls about how do I move this vehicle into traffic. And all of those decisions that you're making and how you're aware of the kind of what are the conditions of the road, all of these things that go into just driving. The amazing computational processes that your mind's in the middle of when you drive. Then knowing, okay, you have to go to a gas station. And when you go to a gas station, you've got a lot of choices. You can either fill up. Do you check your oil? Do you need to get a Diet Coke or something? Then you might have a little chit chat with somebody behind the counter. You know, you go buy things. There's all this cognitive reasoning that's going on just being out in the world and driving. And then you also learn things like courtesy, letting other drivers in. You're aware of people crossing the road. You have to know where it is you're driving to.
Sometimes even if you have to use a map.
There's all these things that go into driving that give you critical reasoning skills, and you understand how to organize your thoughts. And these are things that no one even thinks about at the time because it's happening anyway. And now kids don't learn that. Nope. So there's everything from common courtesy to respecting the fact that you're on the road with a lot of other people and you have to be aware of what they're going to do in addition to what you're going to do to avoid problems.
Yeah.
All of those skill sets have been removed from kids starting at 16.
Yeah, because driving is a lot of it is the honor code, and you can't just kind of like say, I don't give a F about whatever. You can't just throw chance to the wind with driving.
No.
The responsibility of it is too great and the danger is too great. But if you took an I don't give a fuck attitude towards driving, like it would be a disaster.
Yes.
You know, going ahead and saying that you're going to say, well, I don't have to learn how to drive. You know, it's because that level of responsibility sometimes you don't want to take it on. You don't want to do it. But for most of us in this age category, we have had to drive for a good portion of our lives.
Well, it's even when you come to a stop sign and understanding who has the right of way. It's not necessarily a written rule, but everybody knows, you know, the person that got to the stop sign first has the right of way. If you get to a stop sign like, fuck that guy, I'm just going to I'm going to hit my accelerator. Yeah. These are things that you learn. And we have a whole generation of people that haven't learned these things. And you can see, and same in school, there's a level of respect for one another and for the world that you live in. Like when you're driving around, I'll tell you one thing, it would be a lot harder to organize flash mobs to go destroy stores and shit if everybody was driving cars, because they would realize the chaos that would represent, not just to, but the idea that you can organize a flash mob and go in and loot stores and stuff like that. Part of that mentality comes from the fact that you aren't out and realizing how much our infrastructure means to us, stoplights and things like that. There's absolutely no respect anymore, and it's been completely removed. And you could say driving is one of the things, but it's a myriad of things. It's not respecting teachers. It's not respecting the actual work you do in school is no longer respected. You know, the reading a book and having a book transform your life just because you were captivated by it or you learned something from it that you hadn't learned before. And it's crazy to me, but we're seeing it. You can see it on a daily basis online on whatever show you're watching. You know, or whatever YouTube channel you're watching, you see it everywhere.
Flash mobs used to be about dancing, though, right? Like, when did they turn into these raids where they want to steal? Like,
well,
how
that's
does it
and organize. Let's cover our faces. I mean, it's crazy. But see, if social media clout, no, we're protesting this. Oh, really? You're going to protest this by going into a Popeye's chicken and stealing all the food?
Popeye's chicken.
You know, they did that. And then that chick, what's her name? That influencer, Mudhoney or whatever her name was, she live streamed it's amazing. She's live streaming all these things. And then she gets pulled over by the cops and winds up crying her eyes out because she gets caught.
Because she got caught by a cop.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at
You
this.
should have been doing that shit, dummy.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, and all the people that organize this stuff, because they don't understand the consequences and they don't understand the ramifications. Like, if you're going after a local, who do you think owns that Popeye's chicken? It's a locally owned franchise, probably owned by a business person that's in your own neighborhood. You know, I remember during the LA riots, the 7-Eleven by my apartment got burned down. They were looting and burning everything, and I'm like, this is a locally owned 7-Eleven. It's owned by the people. Yeah, and it's like you've burned down a business, and we all go there. like who? This is our 7-Eleven. These were the people that owned it. Like, and it's such a weird. All that kind of understanding is gone now, especially for and I think, to bring the point back home, I think with writing, they're not focusing. There's a reason why those fundamentals were taught: reading, writing, arithmetic, cursive. Anytime we are losing a skill, and people might say we don't need to learn how to write cursive, it's not the actual writing of the cursive that's important. It's training your mind how to do it. And your mind and hands.
Putting yourself up for certain things, certain attributes, signatures.
Absolutely. And also just
learning how to,
and thinking about
learning how to write within the margin as well, bro.
Yeah, and thinking about the sentence you're writing.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and
hold on.
It also gives you a different perspective with language itself. You know, you're creating letters and the forms and the functions and all that. We've missed out this idea that we don't have to teach any of that stuff, that they've prioritized. Well, if you don't learn these things, you know, we're never. And it's like you have to score a number on a test. Clearly, we have a whole generation of people, multiple generations of people. I just wonder where they're going to be in 30 or 40 years. Where's the world going to be in 30 or 40 years?
They're going to be in trouble. It's like we went backwards. It's like we went backwards in the education system. And on top of it, we had COVID. So it's like a double whammy. Not only are, let's say, Gen Zs affected, but even the younger generations, the minors, have had an issue because they haven't been able to complete grades over the past few years. So,
and by the way, this is predominantly an American problem. I mean, wait till we see the brain trust, the loss of real. This country is going to be in a world of hurt in 10 or 20 years.
Now, Robert, we have some super chats that
we do. Let me jump into those. let's have super chats get us back on track. Yes. RRTNZ says, come on, you guys. The effort Lael and others put into explaining and defending the holes in Ahsoka's telling. The show looks good, but Filoni writes the scripts in crayon. Well, I don't know. I wouldn't say that necessarily because, you know what? Filoni did some great work in Clone Wars and Rebels. You know, I mean, I really like those shows. I think the problem with these Star Wars shows is the translation it's the way they're shooting them. And the way they're all being designed, I think it's a multiple-fold problem in terms of both the writing and the execution. So,
and keep in mind, bro, like I think the biggest problem that we're running into is they have to eventually get beyond this fucking half-hour, 45-minute time slot. Bro.
Oh yeah.
You cannot, because here's the thing is, in my opinion, I think you're rushing the narrative and things are being missed because they're squashed into a shorter time period, bro. And none of that aspect of it makes sense to me. Again, despite the simple fact that I'm enjoying it, is it perfect? No, not by far. I don't think that we're striving for a level of perfection that's not going to be reached. I think in a lot of things, but it's the time. Like, just, there's like, I think this last episode they said it's 49 minutes with the credits and everything in it. It's like 46. You know what I mean? So still, I even think that is still too short. It is way too short. Like, they need longer episodes that would give more room. It doesn't seem congested. It's more room to tell the story and make it a bit more cohesive. Right now, it's just not working. For me, I don't think it's working.
Right.
I also think there's like a disjointed order of operations in the series. And, for example, I would have been happy with a series where it was just Ahsoka and it was her experience with the Force and we saw no one else. I would have been happy with a series like that. So, the fact that we got all these extra characters is a huge bonus. I didn't know we were going to be getting something like this, but the order in which they tell us certain segments, if I had the decision to make, I would have put Ahsoka's journey as the first thing that you see in this, and you get to understand more about her. And then we can go on into other parts, but then I probably would have gone ahead and seen THRAWN even before we got to the other side of the galaxy. Mm-hmm. And kind of gotten an understanding of where he is at and maybe where EZRA was at too.
Yeah, I mean, the storytelling is just disjointed. It is, and also, like you said, Ahsoka, these shows where the Book of Boba Fett, where you leave Boba Fett and you go into the Mandalorian for 2 episodes, and Ahsoka was barely in. It's 8 episodes, and there's 1 episode where you see her traveling, and that's it for like 1 scene, and she's not in the rest of the show. And then you ask yourself, okay, the whole journey should be through her eyes, and then all this other stuff is always connected to it, but the narrative thrust should be with her. But because the length of the episodes and everything, it's really weird. None of these shows feel like they're written like any other TV show that has narrative thrust to it. They jerk you around. It's so, back and forth, and it never feels like.
I'm sorry. One of the other options that I thought would have been interesting, they didn't do this, but one of the other options I think would have been interesting is if the story was told completely from Huang's point of view, because he's the most knowledgeable individual in this group. He knows more. Maybe the Night Sisters know more, but for all practical purposes, for our level of understanding when the story starts, he would sort of be the narrator, the person who's the record, right? So he could give us insights in a manner that is explainable as, an artificial life form, but not in a way that you would expect a human or a human being to give you an explanation. And they could push on that and work on those nuances, like when he talks about like that magical moment when he's with Ahsoka and he starts to talk about, remember when I used to tell you about the history of the galaxies, part 1, 2, and 3? I was like, what? Like, that instantly grabbed your attention as a listener, even if you didn't know anything about this series at all. You're like, well, no, what is the history of the galaxy 1, 2, and 3? You're instantly hooked. It's only something that he would have memorized in his incredible database, only something he can provide to the audience. Even Ahsoka wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear it too. And I think he could do those nuances in the story, and they could have used that, let's say, from another angle. But they try to fit a lot into this series, a lot. And I don't think I've seen a series where they've tried to fit in so much in such a short amount of time. It really is remarkable to also get it looking so pristine.
By the way, Darth Plato, because we started late, said we skipped the party and went straight to the after party. Game on. Al Rencho says it feels like there will either be a major cliffhanger in the Ahsoka finale because it seems impossible to cover everything. The Baylen storyline, THRAWN escaping, the reunion of the Rebels crew, Ezra learning the truth. I totally agree with that. I mean, and it's going to be another one of those things where we're going to get like a 38-minute episode. And all this stuff's going to happen. And I'm like, what?
They said it's 49 minutes. It's 49 minutes, but 46 minutes with the credits.
Yeah. See,
without the credits. That's
crazy.
One thing I think they did do right, and of course, Lael can attest to this, is that fan event. I think that that was something that when you're
The fan
trying
event was
to,
amazing. I
you
mean,
know,
again, that to me was a testament that Star Wars and again, these films it belongs on the main screen. It does. It belongs back in theaters. It belongs in a space where they can tell good stories, and it's not without constraint. It
Yeah.
definitely belongs on the big screen. And I think that again, with these films that are coming, that they're talking about. I mean, I hope. Look, I lean on the side of all optimism, and I'm just hoping that we can get, those films on the screen again. And
well,
Me
what's
too.
also interesting about this is that, and I know I've said this to both of you and everybody who's listening, but I would have paid money to have gone to see it in the theater. Like I would have just given the cash, like for the fan event, if they opened it up. And I'm grateful for what we can get, but I did just want to put that out there because for
yeah,
those of us who can get to a theater, I totally would have paid $20 or
oh man,
$30
it was
just to see
it
that
was
episode.
an amazing event. Seeing it, in IMAX. The seating experience. Everybody was in there for one purpose, and just the excitement behind it. It was incredible. Which I'm surprised that the finale is not going to be
Yeah.
going to be. So I don't know.
Um, John from New York says, my issue with the show, as with most Star Wars TV, is the pacing. Thrawn could have shown up much sooner, and for a show named Ahsoka, she really isn't the main focus. I love your show, guys. Well, thank you
Oh,
for that.
thank you so much.
I
Thank
think we all
you.
agree that the pacing. I think, look, Star Wars was always a feature film. I mean, we had the philosophical difference between the approach to animation and the approach to live action is weird to me. That we're getting essentially Ahsoka's an animated series. It's a continuation of two animated series in live action, and I don't necessarily think it works. I think that the Ahsoka series might have worked much better, even if it's the same thing, in animation. I don't think they've figured out, because Star Wars in live action, all of these shows have not done Star Wars justice. Star Wars is a big screen franchise. Regardless of whether you like the prequels or not, the scope of it was big. It was big. Whether you're on you've got the Gungans, or you've got anyone fighting on giant rolling hills, or whether you're fighting in space, or whether you're in in Geonosis in the Colosseum there, it's big. And watching Star Wars on TV, they've tried to like Obi-Wan Kenobi should have been a big movie. What's that?
I said they've again, watching it on TV, though enjoyable, you can definitely see the difference of it being on the main screen.
Yeah.
Just with the dialogue, just with, again, there are definitely some pacing issues there. And again, time restraint, bro. Big time restraint. Like, I guarantee you, like, watching this, and somebody's going to do it. We already know somebody's going to actually take the Ahsoka show and they're going to make it one big film, and we'll be able to see it.
Right. That's the thing. I'm waiting for the fan edits of all the Star
There's
Wars
gonna be a
TV
fan
shows.
edit. There's
And by the
definitely
way,
gonna
it'll
be a
be
fan edit.
awesome. The fan edit will be
Need
awesome.
Patterson to come in here and do it again. Do another one for us, Patterson.
Yeah.
He's definitely going to do it again. That fan edit, they're going to do it again, and we might get a different perspective on it, because that edit that he did for Obi-Wan was phenomenal. Like, it was incredible.
Yeah.
But there's going to be that. But again, hopefully there's faith in it being on the big screen again, and hopefully this time that it actually happens. So,
Yep.
we'll see.
I also wanted to say that Rosario Dawson is an excellent actress, and she's kind of a heavy in her own right. So I think it would have been interesting, and I don't know whether they did this or not, but I would have liked to have seen what she could have done with this if she had, the ability to have any influence over it, which I doubt that she did. You know, she's following the script in the direction
Right.
of what they want her to do. But because she has so much experience as an actress in so many different types of roles, they just let her make it her own. This woman is incredibly interesting. She, you know, I don't know whether that's even possible, but you know, from what I can see, how it's kind of restricted, and she does feel it does. I do get a sense that there's a little bit of restriction in it.
Oh,
I think just her personality, just Rosario Dawson, even, you know, going through with this and putting her own spin on this would have been very interesting.
well, and I also think that they should have given her a show that wasn't so tied to the Rebels crew. Give her the fact that they've turned this into a live action Rebels show, which is essentially what it is. I think it takes away from her journey. They could have, the same way that Obi-Wan Kenobi's journey had to include Princess Leia and all this other stuff, they could have focused it on Ahsoka's travails, and then the second season would have been bringing the Rebels team after that. But let her shine. Let Ahsoka go through her crucible. So now she's Ahsoka the White instead of Ahsoka the Gray or whatever. And because there's all the fact that we're talking about Baylen Skoll, a character who's brand new to this show, more than we're talking about Ahsoka, proves that there's it might have been, everyone's talking about THRAWN, everyone's talking about everybody but Ahsoka, unless she's with who? Anakin, you know. Kevin Morales says, so there is a right and a wrong, and either can be correct depending on your point of view. Well, I don't think either can be correct. I just think depending on who you are, like, I think right, I believe in an actual right and wrong. I think that in human beings, in our culture, it ultimately, at its baseline, we don't need some all-powerful being to tell us that it's better for us if we're nice to one another. I think human civilization works better if we are kind, open-hearted, and accepting of our other fellow members of the human race. I think that's a baseline that and I don't think that there's a different point of view that's necessarily the right one. Our civilization just works better if people are nice because we need one another to exist. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that's, and there's no point of view. Hunter Becknell says, Rob, any thoughts on a potential Nolan Bond trilogy? Look, I'd love to see Chris Nolan make a Bond movie, but I think going back and making a 60s Bond movie is weird to me, considering all the Bond movies of the 60s were it's weird because if you went back and made a 60s Bond movie now, we'd have to do it through the glass, the prism of history, whereas the Bond films started and they were contemporary, brand new, modern movies that took place in the 60s. So it'd be weird to go back and do, like, we've already had 60s Bond movies. Unless you went further back in the 50s and adapted the Fleming books. I'd love to see Christopher Bond make a new movie. I don't know. There's talk of that. I don't know if any of that's true, but whatever. Russell Whitfield says, coffee for my co-host.
Hi, Russ. Thank you so much, Russ. Hope you are well. So good to hear from you tonight. Love always.
Kevin Frazier says, greetings, gentle beings and billowing baddie. Just joining now, so I might have missed it, but have any of you watched Gen V? I have not yet. I know it just dropped.
Not yet. I just got done watching the first episode of Continental, so that's where I'm at.
I have watched an episode of Gen V, and you know, it's not a bad series. It is very much like The Boys. Of course, it is a spinoff of The Boys. I can tell you that. It is more of a teenager-based show, or young adult, if you will, based show, with as many shocking and bizarre events as The Boys that you would expect. And certainly the acting in this show is remarkable. But I have yet to see anything that's necessarily as grabbing, you know, it's not necessarily holding me the way that The Boys is. And I think it's only because it is about young adults. And I admit that I'm somewhat more disturbed to see young adults going through this chaos rather than, you know, sort of like the mature adults going through it in the Boys, you know, and being honest about it. I don't know whether I want to see our young people going through that, but it is a different perspective, and a lot of work went into it. It's a fascinating show. I don't have a verdict on it yet. Certainly, you do get different viewpoints that the boys never, and like Gen V, like the boys, Gen V gives you these perspectives that you would expect of the level of let's say unusual perspectives of the human body that you get in the
Yeah,
boys. You won't be disappointed if you start watching. It is not a show for children.
no.
It's definitely 18 and over. So yeah,
Mhm.
I say give it a chance. Let's see where it goes. I think the one of the actresses in it is wonderful in this role. And let's see how it is very interesting to see the way young adult soups are treated. It is very interesting to see it, and it's maybe as terrifying as what we see in The Boys. So if you like that, if you like to see the younger set version of it, I think you'd be happy with it.
I
So
can't wait. I'm gonna watch it right when we wrap up this stream. Ryan says, like Frank Herbert and Tolkien, had George Lucas written a comprehensive lore decades ago, Star Wars wouldn't be a butchered mess right now. Well, you know what? George Lucas, unlike Tolkien and Frank Herbert, he never expected this to happen to Star Wars. I mean, I think that the original Star Wars, if all we had was the original Star Wars, it would be still one of the most beloved movies in the world. We'd still be obsessing over all of it, even today. But George Lucas he wasn't like Frank Herbert was writing a universe. He knew he was writing a universe, and so did Tolkien. Tolkien was writing a mythology for Middle Earth or for England. He knew what he was doing, so their world building were a part of it. I mean, George Lucas, remember, Star Wars began because George Lucas wanted to adapt Flash Gordon and couldn't get the rights.
Like, yeah, he wanted to basically,
So,
that.
he wanted.
He was more so influenced by that. So
He wanted swashbuckling space or opera. And I don't think George Lucas would have it in him to do with what Tolkien and he wouldn't have done it, and so Sean Hoover says, throw me into the story where the shit is already going down and moves expeditiously like Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon. Ahsoka is too slow and barely holds my interest. I don't disagree. I mean, and part of the reason is the way the shows are made. They're pretty static because of using the volume. There's not a lot of kinetic camera movement, and by definition, and I think too, the writing, like that first episode of Ahsoka could have been cut in half. Just the way it was cut and shot, if nothing else. And I think that it's a problem shooting on the volume. And what's interesting is Andor was a much more slowly paced show. Some people would say glacially paced. Mm-hmm. But to me, I found it more engaging because the way it was shot. Mm-hmm. Now, our last question. This will take us out, kids. Blazin' Asian.
My man.
Blazin' Asian says, my Ahsoka finale prediction. Thrawn leaves, leaving the rebels stranded. Later, a ship crashes on the planet, and out walk Lone Star and Barf. Barf can't walk out. John Candy's dead. So you're doing a Spaceballs Star Wars crossover.
Mashup. That's what I'm talking about.
Why not?
Well, that brings us to the end of tonight's show. I want to first ask Lael Rockwell, what do you got going on? Tell people where you are at.
So I am you can find me over at the 1/6 Scale Man YouTube channel. Listen, we are, let me see, where we at, right, Rob? Let me tell you where we at right now.
Please do.
Let me tell you where we're at right now. What we got going on? How many subscribers do we have, and how many more do I need? Let's check it out. So I am actually at 3,886 subscribers. I am almost at 4,000 subscribers. I need all of you out there. If you watch the show, if you do support this show, definitely, and you want more content, if you do support my journey, please head over and subscribe to the 16 Scale Man YouTube channel. I am at 3,886 subscribers.
Do it, guys. Do it right now.
Right
Do it.
now,
Do
head
it.
over there, subscribe to the channel. Please support your boy and get him there. Again, we normally have Collectors Lounge International. Tomorrow I'm not going to have it because, again, I got a lot of stuff to do. But we got Comic Book Talk with Friends on Monday. Say What Wednesday, Uncivilized Scoundrels this Thursday. And then also Figure Flex Friday. A couple videos I got coming up as well. So if you could, head on over, support your boy. Help me get to 4,000 subscribers. I definitely appreciate it if you could.
And when you go over to Lael's channel, remember that he has a fundraiser going on, everybody.
Halloween initiative. Thank you.
A holiday initiative where every super chat that you have on Lael's channel, regardless of the show, is going to go towards the holiday initiative, getting children Halloween costumes for this holiday, guys. So
Thank
please
you so much.
go over there, subscribe to Lael's channel, and why not go ahead and give a super chat there? It's going to a great cause.
Yes.
Absolutely do that, guys. When you watch Figure Flex Friday, you get to vote on
Yes, you do.
what figure you like the best, what pose you like the best. Join the Facebook Figure Flex as well. You'll be able to do a vote right on there and see the flexes. Guys, I guarantee you don't want to miss out on this.
Thank you so much.
You won't be disappointed.
And make sure, and I know she's going to talk about it, but make sure you actually subscribe to Positive Fandom as well. Please get on over there. Come on, man. Get it. Where you at right now?
I'm at 1,410 subscribers. I could really use some more subscribers.
Get those subscriber counts going. Get her to 3,000 by the end of this. Seriously, 3,000. Let's put it out there. Put it out in the universe. 3,000 subscribers by the end of the week. 4,000 subscribers to me and 3,000 subscribers by the end of the week for so definitely make it happen. Let's go.
Thank you so much.
Our friend Elon Abadi gifted 5 memberships, Burnettwork memberships, people. So thank you, Elon.
Appreciate
our
it.
master of the AI art. Nathan Trujillo says, please stop flash mobbing my Popeyes, Rob, and 7-Eleven. That's where I get my spicy chicken and sweet tea. I promise I won't do that anymore. Tim the Lurker is a new member here. Thanks, Tim. And finally, Scott Bartholomew asks about the status of 10 and 20. It's coming. It's coming. It's just I've been so busy doing all these things. But it will, Scott, and I appreciate you asking. And it will come, and you'll like it. It'll be good. And on that note, everyone, episode number 67 of Midnight Musings is coming to a close. I want to thank my lovely cohorts, Lael, Rockwell. Oh, wait a minute. RM, I haven't asked you what you're doing.
Well, I have a very interesting week coming up. Of course, I do have my Sunday brunch show on Sunday tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. with my co-host Russ, who was here tonight. Thank you, Russ, for everything. But I also have Ladies at the PGS on Monday with Lorena Creel right here on the Burnettwork. I also have the Wheel of Time season 2 wrap up with Stubble McShave scheduled for Friday. So you guys will see that. I probably will be reviewing Ahsoka with Catherine Cook as well on the channel. But I also have a little bit farther down the line, SEAL Team. Guys, if you watch SEAL Team with David Boreanaz, I'm going to be doing a watch party of the season on my channel. Also, The Crown, I think it's season 6 or 7. Lorena is going to be joining me, and we're going to be doing a live watch party with that. I also have my watch party that I do with Darth Plato, where we look at historical films. So please do check that out. We do them every Thursday at 6 p.m. Last week, we had a great time. We reviewed Hamburger Hill. We're looking at all those films, historical films that we think are so important. But we also did our William Friedkin tribute. Part 1. Part 2 is coming up. It's going to have The Exorcist in it. You guys don't want to miss that as well. And certainly, guys, Darth Plato and I are going to be reviewing the new Napoleon when it comes out with Joaquin Phoenix. So that's pretty much everything that is coming up with Positive Fandom. And I'm going to start my gaming stream soon, which I can't wait to share with you all. And thank you, Lael and Robert, and everybody in the chat for all the support. Tom Jr. Jackson, we are all goof people. Yeah, thanks everybody. Love you all.
All right, kids. Well, I will let you go. This was another fine, fun stream. We'll be back next week. Yeah, I'm going to Portland, but I will be back for next week's stream.
Okay.
Yeah, man,
Go.
party in Portland. I got to work in Portland on Wednesday and Thursday
go.
and Friday. So I'm going to Portland twice in October
Wow.
to shoot for crisis medicine, tactical casualty care. So maybe I'll go see Roberto Suarez. Party in Portland, man.
As soon as Rob gets off the plane, he's going to walk to the terminal. They're going to be like, oh, Robert Burnett. There's going to be a little kid that's going to walk up and be like, are you my dad? Do you know my mom?
Oh, man. There's somebody up there I'd like to say that. Yeah, my sister is actually my 100% biological sister that I didn't know till I was 29. Her and her son and her husband are up there. So it's always fun to go see them.
Cool,
So that's good. So there is somebody who I did not know who's my biological sibling. I didn't even know I had a biological sibling, but she's there. All right, everybody. I will let you all go. Thanks for another great time. So,
see you later.
All right. I will see you guys later. Always a pleasure to have my lovely co-hosts on the show. It's fantastic. I am not going to bring randos on tonight. I know. I'm going to do it. I'm working up to it. You know, it was easier when I was drunk. No, and it's not that I'm not anti-drinking or anything like that, and I'll still drink. I've just been drinking water, trying to get healthier, get the skin not so old looking. But on that note, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. And I believe that. I want to thank Tom Jr. Jackson for being a great moderator, as always. We are all goof people, Tom. I want to thank all of you for generously supporting the channel via super chats and tips and memberships and all of that. Thank you all very much for being the way you are. Al Renshaw fires in. Actually, I could stay here for a little while longer. Al Renshaw says, keeping Andor and Obi-Wan, would you rather have Knights of the Old Republic or a Favreau Filoni verse? Honestly, I'm leaning Knights of the Old Republic. Darth Revan, Din Djarin, Bo-Katan, Ahsoka, etc. I'll tell you what. I think that the Filoni verse, the Favreau Filoni verse, should come to an end. I think it has not resulted in the best. We don't have the best results. And I honestly think that Knights of the Old Republic. Here's the thing. All fantasy storytelling, science fiction, fantasy, and horror, has to relate back to us in some way. Like all stories, even our favorite genre stories, are ultimately about us in some way, shape, or form, whether it's metaphorical, whether it's directly about us or something. I mean, not because I'll bring up Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon, only because the Knights of the Old Republic stories, of which there are a lot, whether they're in comic form or whether they're in novel form or whether they're in video game form, the Knights of the Republic hark back to many other different kinds of fairy tales and stories, medieval tales, whether you're talking about the Ring of the Nibelung, whether you're talking about Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table, whatever, the Trojan War, the Odyssey and the Iliad, warfare of any kind, all of that could play into Knights of the Old Republic. And I think there's much potential for great storytelling. So we'll see. But I think Knights of the Old Republic, and by the way, we need an entirely new creative staff. I think that these franchises are best when you allow, otherwise they become moribund, unless the creators have already proven they really know what they're doing repeatedly, but we haven't seen that. So I'd love to see Knights of the Old Republic. I think the people that made a show like that would have a much greater handle on what the show is that they're making, but we'll see. I don't know. Scott Bartholomew sends in another super chat and says, any scuttlebutt on Trek movement going forward? You know, I haven't been paying attention. I haven't talked to Terry about this or anything. To be honest, we heard that from the director of Pet Sematary Bloodline, who was working on Star Trek 4, that nope, the project's still alive. I honestly, my interest in modern Star Trek is finished. I'm so not. I really do think that the Star Trek franchise has been run into the ground. And I have no. It's really sad because it's still my favorite. It's the franchise that's been with me my whole life. I mean, I loved it so much. I actually made a movie with my childhood idol and talked about how much I love that show. And it's weird to think it has no relevance to me. Star Wars was. I loved Star Wars as an action adventure space fantasy. But Star Trek was something that gave me, it pointed me into it in a direction, into the kind of life and kind of universe I wanted to live in. It showed me the kind of people. It showed me people that I wanted to become, or at least the kind of people I wanted to become. And it pointed a direction in the kind of human being I wanted to be. There's nothing like that in Star Wars or Star Trek anymore. Nothing. Star Trek has nothing more to say to me, which I think is unfortunate. And it's because the writing staff does not know how to write stories that speak to people. They're giving you riffs on better stories that were told better previously. So as far as Star Trek is concerned, look, I wish everybody who works on the show all the best. I'd love nothing more than to see Star Trek come back. A chemist sends in a super chat and says, Rob, you're given the keys to the city, complete creative control. What do you immediately greenlight for the Trek universe? Books, movies, film, figures? Well, here's the thing. I think that one of the real problems is that Kurtzman Trek, the idea that they were trying to make these canonical yet non-canonical stories within the universe are problematic, and I honestly don't know if it can be fixed, because I think right now that Star Trek is so of today. Lower Decks is so of today, the way everybody acts, and Discovery, the politics of Discovery is of today. So there's really there's no real Star Trek left. And when I say what I mean by that is Star Wars. I mean, I keep saying Star Wars. We've been talking about it for so long. Star Trek used to be an action adventure science fiction allegory. There is no more allegory. It's all postmodernism, hitting their points on the head. I am missing science fiction from Star Trek. I would love to see a real interesting science fiction subject grappled with on a Star Trek episode. When you see something like The Creator, and I'm not saying that you need to duplicate it exactly, but something that asks those kinds of questions. A great Star Trek episode should pose a moral, ethical, societal question, and through the story it tells, explore that question, and do it in an action adventure, sci-fi, allegorical way. That's entertaining, but I don't think it's doing that. It's not, and it's too bad. And I don't know if Star Trek. I don't know if anybody. To be honest, I could pick out. I think what I would do if I was given carte blanche is I would first go pick out my writing staff, hand pick them, and say, okay. These are I would oversee it. I wouldn't even be the showrunner, because I'd have to hire a showrunner who knew how to run a TV show. I've never run a TV show before. I'd much prefer being a creative I'd be in creative oversight. But I'd hire. I know who I would hire. I'd go get. There's 10 writers I would get right now, and hire them to do that. That's what I would do. Nathan Trujillo says, I'm looking forward to Loki season 2. I got to tell you, as much as I think Loki season 1 pushed the MCU too far, I still like the show. I think that Victor Timely will connect things to the Stark Expo and the beginnings of the MCU. Probably. I think that's probably a good idea. But I don't know. I still think it's gone too far. I still think it's kind of broken the universe, but that's okay. Thomas Logan. Hello, Tomas. Thomas says, you were the first to cover Colin Trevorrow's Scrap Duel of the Fates script. You should be the first to cover Ashley Edward Miller's Zack Stentz's X-Men vs. Fantastic Four script. Words out that it was Fox's Civil War. Well, it's funny because Zack Stentz would be one of the first people I would hire for my Star Trek writing staff. Zack and Ashley wrote together before they wrote Thor and X-Men First Class. They were on Andromeda, the TV series Andromeda. Then they worked on Fringe and Twilight Zone. To be honest, I've never read. Zack and Ashley know that if they had given me that script, I would have blabbed about it all over town. Blah, 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 blah. And I would. I don't think Zack and Ashley are the kind of people that would give me that script to read. I mean, sure, I'd love to cover it. I've always wanted to read it, and I've always asked them about it, but they haven't given it to me. And I understand that because it's a project that could still have life in it at some point in the future. I mean, who knows? Now, by the way, this is not. I don't know anything. Don't people think I'm not insinuating that I know anything about a Fantastic Four X-Men script. I mean, I know they wrote it. They got paid to write it. I know it exists, but I'm not saying that it's ever going to be part of what is happening over at Disney or moving forward. It's one of the, for every movie that gets made on a franchise property, there's usually probably 10 other scripts with the same franchise property that didn't get made. So I've never read it. I really do appreciate Zack and Ashley's writing. I think they're great screenwriters. They're very imaginative. Do you know that Zack and Ashley met and started writing on the internet, and they had not met face-to-face when they started their writing career? They've written a novel together. I was able to be one of the people that hired them to write Agent Cody Banks. Although, unfortunately, we sold Cody Banks to the studio, and they loved that script. And then they decided to make Agent Cody Banks for tweens. It was meant to be Ferris Bueller meets James Bond for people between the ages of 16 and 26. We sold it to MGM. Hey, I got paid, and the movie got made, and I'm the only single card credited producer in the opening titles, or pardon me, the main titles are in the end. And even though I'm only a co-producer, Madonna. Do you know Madonna was a producer on Agent Cody Banks? Madonna was. Jason Alexander was. Seinfeld, Jason Alexander. But they all share their credits. Not me. So, I'm single card, baby. That's what I am. That's one of the things I've earned in Hollywood. Single card credit. Which you can see on screens in Germany on October 4th. Tango Shalom. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I could. I don't think that it would be appropriate. We knew that Duel of Fates never was going to get made, and so I felt like it was okay to do it. But Fantastic Four versus X-Men, or X-Men versus Fantastic Four, it could have elements in it. I don't know. I would feel uncomfortable breaking that story. Dan Candy says, have you watched the Wes Anderson shorts on Netflix? I have not. I didn't know they were on Netflix yet. I knew they were coming. I've been so working on, I've been between going to Universal and doing Designing Hollywood yesterday, driving around being on the John Campea show, prepping for my crisis medicine shoot, and doing our scripted audio drama podcast, which, by the way, we are doing the Max Allan Collins, who wrote the novel, or the graphic novel Road to Perdition's based on. We have the rights. We're working with Max Allan Collins, and we are going to be adapting his Nathan Heller series. This book comes out October 10th. Too Many Bullets. This is the character we're adapting. The 18th book in the series. So I've been working on that as well. So a lot going on, and finishing our movie White Devils. It's been, God, this craziness. Anyway, so yeah, there's lots of stuff. Scott Bartholomew says, do you prefer book adaptations or scripts from scratch? It's a good question. I mean, to me, I just like great stories. One of the best script I ever read, that I read when I was a reader, was Andy Kevin Walker's script for Seven. David Fincher 7. That was totally original. Totally original. And I loved it. I thought it was great. But, book adaptations, at least you know where you are going. And I would love to, a lot of the things that I want to make are books. So either way, I just want great stories. I think great stories are where you find them. And on that note, everyone, I'm going to bring an end to this episode. There's no Let's Get Physical Media tomorrow. I apologize. Dieter's not going to be able to do it. So there's no Let's Get Physical Media tomorrow. And I didn't really call anybody because I've been so busy this week to try and get someone else to be on the show. So there's no Let's Get Physical Media. So I hope people don't get pissed. I'm probably going to do a Robservations, though. And the Robservations might be with my good friend Michael Davis, who directed Shoot 'Em Up with Clive Owen and Monica Bellucci. I love Michael. Had a long conversation with him today. He's a great man. Maybe I'll bring him to you tomorrow. We shall see. And on that note, remember, I already said it, everybody you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. All right, kids, ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle, kind souls, however you identify across the 28 known galaxies, you're all welcome here. And I wish you a better night. And I just realized I had some letters to read. Damn it, Omar. I'm going to get to you, I promise. We'll talk soon.